Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Tonight, we're exploring 20 Texas houses that people abandoned overnight, homes left behind in a single night, without warning, without reason. Some say they were cursed. Others say something inside wouldn't let them stay, but one thing's for sure, whatever made them run is still there. From homes that bleed to rooms that whisper your name, these aren't just ghost stories. They're true Texas horror legends. And each one will make you wonder what you'd do if you heard footsteps in a house that should have been empty. But before we begin, here's something strange. Most viewers make one terrifying mistake. They leave without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button NOW, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a warning. Tell me, where are you watching from? What time is it there? Drop it in the comments, because here, the night never ends and the horror is just getting started. Now, let's open the door to the first house and step inside. There's something about yellow paint that makes people trust a house. Maybe it's the way it catches the afternoon sun, or how it reminds folks of school buses and lemonade. But the yellow on the house at 119 Mesquite Lane had faded to something sickly, like bruised butter or bone marrow left too long in a jar. It was the last house on the lane, past a cul-de-sac that nobody used anymore. The kind of house real estate agents call a fixer-upper with charm. When the Turners moved in, people were glad. It had sat empty for years, ever since Old Man Simmons was found slumped over in his recliner, one hand resting on the remote, the other clutching a photograph of 5 people nobody could ever identify. The Turners seemed nice. Too nice, some said. A family of 5. Ron Turner, tall, soft-spoken, wore polo shirts even on weekends. His wife, Denise, baked too often and offered pies to neighbors who weren't asking. And then the kids, Allie, 11, who played the violin, with an unsettling kind of calm. Josh, 8, who wore cowboy boots even in the rain. And baby Emma, who cried only at night, right at midnight, like a clock that had never been wound down. People noticed odd things right away. The curtains never changed, not once in the 8 months they lived there. Pale blue, always pulled just too wide. No one ever saw them close, even at night. Denise talked about painting the place, wanted to strip that old yellow off. Sighed. It made her skin itch just looking at it, but they never did. Ron bought paint once, forest green. Left the cans in the garage, unopened. After a while, the neighbors figured it was like that with a lot of things in that house, started, but never finished. It was Old Man Carruthers, the retired postal worker who lived across the street, who noticed first. On the morning of May 19th, the Turner house just sat still. Too still. No garage door humming. No cartoons through the screen door. No Emma's cry. Carruthers said it felt like someone had thrown a heavy blanket over the whole street. By 10 a.m., he walked over. The front door wasn't locked. He knocked, waited, then pushed it open. What he saw never left him. The lights were off, but sunlight spilled through the windows like a golden fog. Dust floated in it, thick like snow. The house smelled wrong, not rotten, not quite. More like a hospital room after too many visitors. Sterile, but lived in. He stepped into the kitchen first. The table was set. 6 plates. Full meals, still warm somehow. Pancakes, eggs, sausage, coffee mugs. 5 chairs pulled back like someone had just stood up. 1 chair at the head of the table, untouched. The chair was different. Old, wooden, not from the set. Hand-carved symbols on its legs, something between ivy and writing. The plate at that seat was stacked high. The other 5 were almost empty, as if eaten in a hurry. Carruthers backed out. Said he felt like he was being watched. like the shadows, had eyes. When the police arrived later that day, the house was cold. Icebox cold, even though the air conditioning was off and the Lubbock sun was beating down outside. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints that didn't belong. No blood. No struggle. Just 5 missing people. And 1 too many seats at the table. The investigation went nowhere. Reporters came and went. The story ran on the evening news for 3 days, then fizzled. The only photo the papers published, the table still set, with food untouched and steaming. That photo was taken at 9:33 a.m., just before the forensics team arrived. By 9:45, all the food had rotted. Every bite. Maggots, decay, stench. 12 minutes dot, the city declared the home a hazard by fall, but no one wanted to demolish it. Contractors walked off the job. One guy, Chavez, said his bulldozer quit cold every time he tried to drive it near the property line. Another swore he saw Denise Turner in the upstairs window, waving, but when they searched the house again, it was still empty. Always empty dot by Christmas, the stories started. Kids dared each other to knock on the door at midnight. One boy, 14, claimed he walked right in, drawn by the smell of syrup and sausage. Said he saw Allie playing violin in the living room, but the song didn't make sense. Said it sounded like crying set to music. He passed out right there. They found him on the porch the next morning with blood coming from both ears. Never spoke again. Another time, a woman trying to steal copper from the house was found in the garage, curled up inside the dryer. Her arms were broken, like she'd folded herself in. They say the house chooses when to show its truth. You can walk past it 100 times and never feel a thing. But if it wants you, it calls. I went in once. I don't talk about it much. It was 3 years later. I was a city inspector then, tasked with documenting abandoned properties. Had to take notes, photos, check for mold, leaks, pests. I remember stepping inside and thinking the floor was too soft, like walking on soaked bread. The walls had started to sag. The air smelled like old breath. And then the violin started. Soft at first, just one note, long, high, almost electronic. But then another joined in, and another, until it was a screeching wail that filled the whole damn house. I dropped my camera, ran into the kitchen. The table was set again, same food, same steam rising, same 6 chairs. But now, the odd chair at the head was facing me, and there was something sitting in it. Not a person, a shape, like a man made of dust and smoke, long arms, and a head that looked too narrow. It raised a finger, I swear to God, and pointed at the chair beside it. My chair. I don't know how I got out. When I came to, I was in my car, parked in front of the house. My camera was in the passenger seat. The pictures on it? Just one. A close-up of that carved chair. On its backrest were names I hadn't noticed before. 5 names, carved clean. Ron, Denise, Allie, Josh, Emma, and below them, one more, freshly carved. My name. I don't work for the city anymore. I don't go near Mesquite Lane. I moved 3 towns over, changed my number, burned the damn photo. But sometimes, just before I sleep, I hear a fork scraping a plate, or the distant sound of a violin crying softly in the dark. And when I do, I know it's still there, that yellow house. Waiting. It sat like a secret too old to confess. A little brick cottage tucked behind the long shadow of the Baptist church off South Polk Street in Amarillo, half swallowed by the tall prairie grass and the rusted fence that curled in on itself like barbed ivy. No one talked much about it anymore. Not even the preacher, especially not the preacher. Some claimed it had once been the church parsonage, Others said it was where the church stored old hymnals and communion sets too tarnished to keep on the altar. But those who'd lived in Amarillo long enough, those who could still remember what the neighborhood sounded like before the highways roared well, they remembered a boy named Tyler Wicks. The last time anyone saw him was October 27, 1993, 11 years old, skinny as a fence post. Last seen riding his bike behind the church, trying to retrieve a football that had landed in the weeds near the cottage. They never found the bike. Never found the football either. Just a single sneaker on the steps, laces untied, and the door to the brick cottage wide open. Though nobody remembered it ever having a key. By Halloween, the whispers had started. It didn't matter that the police sealed it off. Didn't matter that the new preacher refused to talk about it. At night, when the wind crept in from the panhandle, you could hear voices coming from behind the church, low, breathy, like someone leaning in too close to your ear. They'd say your name, just your name. Nothing more. People moved away. The playground across the street rusted in the sun, the swings motionless even on windy days. Dogs wouldn't go near it. Kids dared each other to toss rocks at the windows, but the glass never broke. Instead, the bricks seemed to shudder, as if the house was breathing. And then came Jacob. He wasn't from Amarillo. Drove in from Dumas Inn. A rusted-out Chevy that sounded like it coughed instead of starting. Said he was looking for something cheap. Didn't ask questions when the preacher offered him the cottage rent-free. Just promised to stay quiet, keep the place clean, and never go upstairs after dark. No one told him there wasn't an upstairs. No one should have had to tell him. First week, everything was quiet. Jacob mowed the grass, fixed the porch light, was seen at the Alsop's buying beer and jerky, nodding politely at the cashier. He even helped the church folks carry in boxes for the fall clothing drive. Smiled a lot, but the kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. Sighed he'd come to Amarillo to start fresh. No one asked what he meant. The whispers began. On his sixth night, he said it was the wind. Said it was coyotes. But the seventh night, they said his name. Clear as a hymn, soft as a sighed Jacob. He didn't sleep that night. Sat on the porch till dawn, eyes bloodshot, cigarette shaking in his hand. The next morning, he told the preacher he wanted to break the lease. The preacher just stared at him, a Bible clutched so tight in his hands the cover bent backward. Said there was no lease. Said if Jacob wanted to leave, he should pack quick and pray quicker. But Jacob didn't leave. He told himself it was just a dream, just nerves. Maybe the house had rats in the walls. Or maybe he was going crazy. Wouldn't be the first time. He slept with a knife under his pillow that night. By morning, it was gone. He searched the whole place. Every drawer, every vent. Even climbed up into the crawl space where the insulation was falling down like dead skin. Nothing. Just one odd thing he hadn't noticed before. Narrow wooden door at the top of a short flight of steps. He could have sworn the house was one floor. It looked wrong, like the door had grown there overnight. It had no knob. Just a thin seam, barely visible in the drywall. He stared at it for a long time, and then he heard it again. A whisper, so soft it might have been a trick of memory. Or maybe just the hum in your skull when silence goes on too long. But it said his name. Again, he backed away. Spent the rest of the day at the Denny's on Georgia Street, drinking black coffee and chain smoking, until the waitress asked him to stop staring at the syrup dispenser. He returned home at dusk. The porch light was off. The front door stood ajar. Inside, everything was cold. Too cold, like the heat had been sucked out of the brick itself, like the house had been holding its breath while he was gone. He found the knife on the kitchen table. Clean. Too clean. No dust, no smudge. Beside it, a single child's sneaker. the same kind Tyler Wicks wore. He ran. Got halfway to the curb before he heard it, his name, loud now, echoing like it was being yelled through a long metal tunnel. But it wasn't outside Dot, it was coming from inside the walls. He turned, and for the first time, he saw it. The bricks weren't still. They pulsed, slow, like lungs. Inhale, exhale, a rhythm that didn't match his breath. A rhythm too slow to be alive, but too steady to be dead. And still. It whispered Dot. He went back in. He doesn't remember why. Maybe he thought he could fight it. Maybe he thought it was just a trick, some buried trauma rising like swamp gas. But when he crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind him. He turned, yanked, kicked. It wouldn't budge. The bricks around the frame seemed to expand, then contract. Breathing. The stairs creaked. He didn't want to look, but he did. Door at the top of the stairs had opened. Inside, it was dark. And yet, not. There was a glow. A faint, unnatural red. Like firelight, but colder. Like something behind the walls was lit from within, and bleeding through the cracks. He climbed the stairs. One by one. Slow. Each step groaned beneath his boots, and the air grew thick, heavy. He thought about his sister, dead 10 years from a drunk driver. Thought about how she used to say ghosts weren't real, but memories were, and sometimes they get too heavy for the world to carry. At the top, the doorway yawned wide. The room wasn't a room. It was a hallway. Long, twisting, too big to fit. In a cottage that small, and the walls. They moved. He tried to turn back, but the stairs were gone. Just smooth brick now. Breathing. He stepped forward. And the walls whispered. Not just his name now, but others. Dozens. Hundreds. Each one like a breath on his ear. Each one followed by a silence deeper than any he'd ever known. He ran. But the hallway ran with him. The more he moved, the more it stretched, curling inward. Downward. Like he was sliding down the throat of something ancient and endless. And the voices grew louder. Tyler, Jacob, Sarah, Benjamin, names upon names, children, men, women. So many. Then he saw them. The faces, not in the air. Not floating. In the brick. Pressed into it, as though the walls themselves had taken bites of them and held them just beneath. The surface. Eyes open. Mouths wide, screaming. He clawed at the wall. Tore skin from his fingers trying to find a seam, a crack, a weakness. But the brick just pulsed once and the whispers stopped. That was the worst part. The silence. So deep it swallowed even the sound of his breath. Then the floor dropped. He woke up on the porch that morning. Bright. Birds chirping. The preacher was gone. The church locked. No sign of the congregation. Jacob walked away. Just walked. People who passed. Him said he looked hollow. Said his eyes were open, but too wide. Like someone seeing something for the first time they wished they'd never seen. He didn't talk anymore. But sometimes, just sometimes when the wind hits right, folks walking near the Baptist church on South Polk Street swear they hear something. A whisper. Low, soft, calling your name. The summer Odessa sky baked everything beneath it. Lawns turned to brittle carpets of yellow. Asphalt shimmered like tar pits. And yet somehow, inside the duplex on 19th Street, it stayed cool. Not the kind of relief you welcome, not air-conditioned. Or fan-blown. No, it was the kind of cold that settled into your bones and reminded you of old cellars, long-forgotten basements where something waited in the dark, breathing. They said no one lived there for long. Rent was cheap, the landlord. Friendly and utilities mysteriously low. But people came and went, always in the night. They left furniture behind. They broke their leases and never asked for deposits back. They said nothing to neighbors. just packed up and vanished. One woman left her baby monitor recording for 3 nights. No one knows what it picked up, but she moved out the next morning, with her 3-month-old still strapped in the car seat. Left behind her clothes, her dishes, even her wallet. She never came back for them. When Tony and Mallory moved in, they thought it was a steal. 2 bedrooms, a small backyard, and walking distance to Mallory's new job at the clinic. Tony didn't say it out loud, but he was happy to get out of their 1-bedroom in Midland. Too many memories of long nights with a bottle and no lights on. Odessa felt like a fresh start. That first night, as the sun bled orange through the blinds, Tony walked barefoot across the hardwood floors in the living room. He stopped, looked down. There was something wet underfoot. He crouched, touched it. Red, dark red. Like watered-down blood. He sniffed it. No smell. No iron, no rot. Just warmth, like it had come from a living body. Mallory laughed it off, probably something the last tenant spilled. She scrubbed it. It smeared. Then reappeared the next morning. Same spot. Then the hallway. Then the bedroom. The wood never cracked or bubbled. It just wept, quietly, persistently. They tried everything. Bleach, sanding, replacing a few planks. The moment new wood was laid, it bled too. No one believed them. Contractors came and went, all of them with the same story. No leak, no damage, nothing structural. One guy quit mid-job. Said he stepped on something soft under the floor. And it moved. He didn't ask for payment. Just left his tools and peeled out of the driveway like something was chasing him. Tony started to dream. At first, just shadows behind his eyelids. Then voices, not whispers, but wet, guttural things, like someone talking through water. They said his name. They called him back. He didn't know from where. Then he saw the man. Or maybe not a man, tall, skinless, eyes like holes, leaning against the bedroom doorframe. Sometimes he stood on the ceiling, sometimes beneath the bed, face pressed to the floorboards like he was listening. Mallory said the bleeding got worse whenever they argued. If Tony raised his voice, the floor would beat up under his feet. One night, after a bad fight, it pooled thick enough to soak her socks. That night, she said she saw a child standing at the top of the stairs. Not a child like in ghost stories, no sad eyes or mournful energy. This one smiled. Smiled so wide it cracked his face open, revealing wet muscle and pulsing pink. She screamed. The blood on the stairs dried instantly, curling like old paint. She said it blinked at her before she passed out. Tony started to drink again. Not to get drunk, just to stay numb. He couldn't sleep. Not with the sound of footsteps overhead when no one was upstairs. Not with the floor bleeding around the bed, seeping into the mattress. Not with the dreams that ended with him standing in the backyard staring at the duplex, hands soaked in blood and dirt under his nails. They found the first hole in the closet under the stairs, just big enough for a child to crawl through. It hadn't been there when they moved in. Tony swore. It appeared overnight. There was no insulation inside, no concrete. Just blackness and a faint heartbeat. Mallory said she heard breathing from it. Said it spoke to her sometimes when she was alone, asked her what she would give to make the bleeding stop. Tony boarded it up. Nailed the wood until his knuckles. Bled that night. The bleeding spread to the kitchen. From the ceiling. The neighbors didn't talk about the place, but they noticed. One old man, Mr. Garcia from next door, warned Tony. Said the land used to belong to a slaughterhouse. Said one of the workers went mad in the 60s, locked the doors and kept slaughtering after hours. Cattle, dogs, strays, then a kid, maybe more than one. They said they never found all the bones. Just pits of red clay soaked through with things. that never belonged to the soil. 1 week before they planned to leave, Mallory started sleepwalking. She'd wake up with bloody feet, standing in the living room, swaying slowly. Tony followed the footprints one night. They led to the closet. The wood had been pulled out from the inside. There were scratch marks on the walls, a small handprint. On the ceiling, the bleeding reached the front yard. Neighbors stopped making eye contact. One morning, someone painted a red X on their mailbox. Tony scrubbed it, but it came back the next day, thicker, dripping. The night before they fled, Tony woke up to find the house breathing. He couldn't explain it, but the walls expanded and contracted, creaking softly. Like lungs, Mallory was in the hallway, eyes open, smiling. She said she saw the boy again. Said he told her she'd make a good mother. Said she felt a kick. Tony didn't ask what. He left that night, barefoot, covered in blood. Drove all the way to Fort Stockton before pulling over and vomiting on the shoulder. He looked at his hands. They were clean, but he could still feel the warmth between his toes. Mallory never came with him. No one found her. No one found blood. The house was empty when the police arrived. Floorboards intact. No stains, just a faint cold draft and a strange hum from beneath the staircase. It still rents for cheap. Always has. Every tenant brings something new. Every tenant leaves a little something behind. The ranch house off FM 2222 had been there since the early 60s, back when Austin was still the kind of place where folks left their doors unlocked and kids disappeared into the woods for hours without anyone worrying. It was a low-slung, L-shaped house with limestone siding and red shutters that had faded to the color of dried blood. A wind-worn American flag hung crooked above the porch, and the yard was mostly rock and cactus, with a stubborn patch of Bermuda grass that refused to die. By the time the Harleys bought it in 2009, the place had sat empty for years. They were the kind of family that did things big, big parties, big voices, big laughs. Todd Harley was a local contractor who'd struck it lucky during the housing boom. And Lena, his wife, ran a boutique downtown that sold turquoise jewelry and expensive denim. They had 3 kids, 2 dogs, and enough leftover money to throw a 4th of July bash every year that brought half of Travis County out to FM 2222. The last party was in 22-3. It was a record hot day, 109 in the shade, but folks still came, slathered in sunscreen and chasing cold beers with slices of brisket that had been smoking since dawn. Fireworks popped and sizzled in the truck beds parked around the yard. Music blasted from the Bluetooth speakers that Lena had scattered across the porch. And at one point, just after sundown, someone swore they saw a man standing out by the back fence. No one recognized him. They figured he was a stray friend of a friend, maybe a little drunk, maybe a little too pale. But by the time someone went to say hello, he was gone. That was the first thing. The second came around 10:30, when the temperature dropped by 20 degrees in 5 minutes. No clouds, no wind. Just a weird stillness, like everything was holding its breath. Someone made a joke about aliens. Someone else laughed a little too hard. Then came the voice. It didn't blast from speakers. It didn't come from someone shouting. It was just there, inside every head at the exact same moment. Man, woman, child. Even the dogs froze mid-bark. People dropped their drinks. A few started crying. One woman collapsed and bit through her tongue. And what made it worse was that the voice didn't say anything terrible. It didn't threaten or scream. It just whispered, "You are not supposed to be here." Just that. Once, soft and cold and wet, like a worm crawling through your ear canal. And then it was gone. Panic followed, hard and fast. Some people ran to their cars. Others packed up their kids and didn't even say goodbye. A few left their purses, wallets, even their phones. No one wanted to talk about what had happened. No one wanted to admit what they'd heard. By midnight, the Harley ranch house was empty. By morning, the Harleys had packed up and left too. The whole family vanished. No goodbye post, no moving trucks, just gone. Their boutique downtown shuttered. Todd's construction sites went unpaid. Neighbors said the family left in a rush, left things half-cooked on the stove, lights still on. But no one ever followed up. No police report, no missing persons alert, just nothing. That might have been the end of it. A weird, creepy footnote in some Austin neighborhood forum if it weren't for what started happening next. In September, a pair of college kids from UT broke into the house looking to shoot a paranormal TikTok. They lasted 20 minutes. One of them clawed his own eyes out on camera. The other hasn't spoken since. In November, a realtor tried to show the property. She walked through the house with a potential buyer, then stepped into the kitchen and began speaking in Latin, fluently. Her family said she'd never studied a word of it in her life. She died of a brain hemorrhage 3 days later. In February, a local priest held a blessing service on the lawn. By midnight, the neighbor across the street reported hearing screams. From inside the house, dozens of voices, all speaking in perfect unison. You are not supposed to be here. The city tried to condemn it. But every time someone came out to board up the place, something went wrong. One guy fell off his ladder and broke both legs. Another's eye swelled shut for a week. The contractor assigned to bulldoze the place just walked off the job and never came back. His equipment still rusts behind the gate. People started crossing the street to avoid walking past it. Even the raccoons gave the place a wide berth. And still the house sits there, off FM 2222, under the baking Texas sun. The grass is dead now, completely scorched, except for the tiny patch right under the flag, green as ever. The shutters are rotted. The windows are black. No one has seen the Harleys since that night, but sometimes, just after sundown, people claim they hear laughter coming from the backyard, sharp, frantic laughter, like someone choking on joy. The weirdest thing, though, is what shows up every July 4th. Without fail, no matter the weather, 5 extra place settings appear on the back patio table. White plates, blue napkins, silver forks, all laid out neatly. No one sees who puts them there. No one dares to remove them. And sometimes, if you listen closely, the air gets very still, and the voice returns. Only now, it doesn't whisper. It welcomes. The old shotgun shack sat alone off Farm to Market Road 622, about 10 miles southeast of Goliad, where the thorny mesquites gave way to open pastures and the stars spilled across the sky in thick white ribbons. It was a long abandoned thing, propped up like a skeleton on tired bones, its tin roof half rusted through, its porch sagging, the front door a weather-warped slab of wood that had hung crooked since long before anyone could remember. No one lived there, not anymore. Not since the Kincaid brothers, both drunks and both dead now, got into that knife fight in 1987 that ended with one of them buried in the shallow patch of grass behind the place and the other one disappearing into the brush like a ghost. Locals said the shack was cursed. They said you could hear music from inside it in the middle of the night, not music from a radio or a jukebox, but from one of those old Victrola record players, the kind with the brass horn that made the sound curl through the air like smoke. A slow waltz. A melody that didn't fit the Texas heat or the smell of dust and cow dung. The kind of music that made you think of black dresses and lace gloves and quiet parlors with dead flowers and porcelain vases. And they said that if you stood out by the fence at 3 a.m., just when the music started playing, you could see a man. standing inside in the far left corner of the single-room shack. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink. Just stood there, long and stiff, watching. People in town like to talk about it, especially after a few beers at Chacho's bar off the main drag. But no one went out there, not really. Not after what happened to the DeWitt kid Cody or the Baud couple from Victoria who went missing in 2009. Sheriff had found their car half buried in mud a mile away from the shack. The battery dead, doors open, keys still in the ignition. No sign of them. Just a dry blood smear on the steering wheel and drag marks in the grass heading toward the tree line. I didn't believe in ghost stories. Not really. But I was running. From something done something bad, and I figured hiding out in a place no one wanted to visit was as good a plan as any. I'd spent the last 3 nights sleeping in my truck outside a boarded-up gas station off Highway 59, eating stale crackers, and using a bottle of warm water to rinse the sweat from my face. I needed somewhere off the radar, somewhere the cops wouldn't think to look, and that meant no hotels, no phone, and no contact with anyone who could link me to that mess back in Aransas Pass. That's how I ended up at the shack. I found it. Just before dusk. The air was thick and humid, the sky burning orange at the edges as the sun dropped behind the hills. Crickets were already chirping. The wind carried the faint smell of rotting wood and something else underneath like iron and ash. The kind of smell that made your stomach twist a little without knowing why. I stepped onto the porch. The wood creaked beneath my boots like it didn't want to hold my weight. The door was unlocked. Inside it was musty and dim, the walls yellowed from decades of smoke and heat. A rickety chair sat in one corner, and in the opposite one stood the Victrola, covered in dust but still intact. I don't know why I touched it, curiosity maybe, or that sick thrill that comes when you flirt with the edge of something wrong. I ran my fingers over the brass horn and felt the chill before I even noticed the room had gone silent. Not quiet. Silent. No bugs. No wind. Just dead air. I stayed the night, telling myself I didn't believe in curses or legends. Telling myself I was too tired to care even if the place was haunted. The music started at exactly 3:02 a.m. I was lying on the old floorboards in a sleeping bag, halfway between asleep and awake, when it floated out of the horn thin and scratchy. Like something pulled from deep underwater, a slow, sad waltz. The kind that made your bones ache. I sat up, heart kicking hard in my chest. The air was colder than it should have been, and I could see my breath fogging in front of me like it was midwinter. I turned my head toward the corner, and there he was, tall, pale, wearing what looked like a 3-piece suit from another era, maybe the 1920s or 30s. His hair slicked back, face blank, eyes wide, too wide, like the lids had been cut off. He just stood there, staring at me through the dark. I couldn't move. Something heavy pressed down on my chest. My hands trembled. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't work right, like I'd been drugged. The music grew louder. Not in volume, exactly, but in presence, like it was inside my head. Each note burrowed in behind my eyes and spun there. I blinked once, twice. The man didn't. Not once. He didn't even breathe. Then he smiled. It was slow, deliberate, and unnatural. Lips parting like a puppet's, showing yellowed teeth that seemed too many, too sharp. The kind of smile you dream about and wake up screaming. And then, I was screaming, really screaming, and everything exploded around me. The windows shattered outward. The Victrola cracked like dry bone and fell silent. The man didn't move, but the air around him rippled, like heat off asphalt. I don't remember what happened after that. When I woke, it was daylight. The shack was empty. No sign of the Victrola. No man in the corner, just dust and rot and silence. I told myself I'd imagined it, that it was exhaustion or heat stroke or maybe guilt catching up to me in a way my conscious mind couldn't process. But when I stepped outside, my truck was gone. No tracks in the dirt. No sign it had ever been there. I walked the 10 miles to the edge of Goliad barefoot, bloody and half mad. I told a story to the sheriff that made enough sense to get me a ride to Victoria and a ticket out of town, but I can't sleep anymore. Not since that night, because every night, every single one, I hear the music, no matter where I go, no matter how far I run. Just past 3 a.m., it starts, slow and low. And in the corner of my room, no matter how dark or well lit, I see him. Just standing there, watching, not blinking dot, and every night, he's closer. The house had been empty for decades. Everyone in Anderson County knew it. The old colonial out on Route 84, a few miles east of Palestine, stood crooked against the wind, flanked by gnarled pecan trees and overgrown weeds that had swallowed what used to be a gravel driveway. Paint peeled off its sides like sunburnt skin, the shutters hung at wrong angles, and the second-story windows looked more like hollow eyes than glass panes. No one had lived there since the Weller family disappeared in the early 70s. No one even trespassed, not even the local kids, who'd rather brave the woods at night than get too close to that house. But one Tuesday evening in August, as a storm brewed on the edge of the pine horizon, the Anderson County Sheriff's Department received a call out. It was 8:37 p.m. Sheriff Clint Hardesty had just sat down in his office with a reheated meatloaf sandwich when the dispatch line lit up. Blinking red. Not the regular 911 call either, the direct line. It was supposed to be used for emergencies or internal communication, and it rarely rang. He picked it up. Anderson County Sheriff's Department. This is Sheriff Hardesty. There was a pause, then static dot, then a scream. High-pitched. Male, maybe. Or a child. It was hard to tell because it wasn't just a scream. It was a shriek threaded with panic and rage, as though someone was being dragged across broken glass while still alive. The line popped and crackled, but Clint caught one thing through. The noise, a voice. Thin, trembling, but clear as a bell. They're in the walls. Oh God, they're back. Please, please, Sheriff. And then silence. The line went dead. Clint sat still for a moment, sandwich cooling in his hand. He replayed the sound in his mind, his stomach sinking. He looked at the caller ID log, but it was blank. The line had no number. Impossible. That phone wasn't connected to an outside circuit. Just an old internal system wired into the station back in the 90s. He told himself it was a prank. A messed up prank. But it didn't feel like one. Against his better judgment, he drove out. He didn't call backup. Didn't alert dispatch. He just took his cruiser and made the drive past the closed gas stations and rusted water towers into the night thick with humidity and the distant promise of thunder. He passed the sign for Elmwood Cemetery and made the turn toward the old colonial dot. As he approached, the wind picked up. It didn't feel right. There was something about the trees, the way they leaned toward the road as if listening, watching. Clint parked his cruiser about 20 feet from the house and got out, flashlight in hand instinctively resting on the butt of his holstered Glock. The house loomed like a corpse no one had bothered to bury. The porch sagged in the middle and the front door was shut tight. No lights, no sound. He called out, "Sheriff Hardesty." "Anyone here?" Nothing. He stepped onto the porch. Each board creaked like a dying breath. The air smelled like mildew and copper. The screen door was hanging by one hinge, tapping against the frame with each gust. He knocked. The door swung open by itself. The house was dark inside, black as pitch. He shined his flashlight into the foyer, illuminating a grand staircase coated in dust and cobwebs. Old wallpaper peeled in long strips, and the wood floor was warped from decades of moisture. But the odd thing was, it wasn't completely quiet. Somewhere deep in the house, he heard a sound thud pause thud like something hitting a wall in slow, rhythmic intervals. He stepped inside. His boots left prints in the dust. He could feel the air change, not just temperature, but pressure, like the house was holding its breath. His light caught the edge of a framed portrait that had fallen crooked on the wall, a photo of the Weller family. A man, a woman, 3 children, all smiling, all staring too hard at the camera. He moved toward the sound. It was coming from the living room thud. When he reached the doorway, he froze. The living room was empty, except the rocking chair in the corner was moving. Not a lot, just a slow, steady sway. Back and forth, back and forth. He stepped in, light steady on the chair. It kept moving. The air got colder. He could see his breath now, and then the voice came again. But not from a phone, from the walls. Sheriff. It came from behind the drywall, as if someone was trapped inside the studs. His flashlight flicked once, twice, then held steady. He backed away toward the stairs. "Save me," the voice cried, louder this time. And suddenly there was a bang. Something slammed against the wall from the inside. Then again. The sound echoed through the house, like dozens of fists punching from within. He turned and ran up the stairs, adrenaline now louder than his own thoughts. On the second floor, he found a hallway with 5 doors. Every door was closed, and then they all opened at once, one by one, from left to right, creaking open. Something whispered through the air, not words, not quite, but syllables that curled into his ears like worms. The third door down, the last on the right, opened wider. He felt pulled toward it, like gravity had changed its mind. Inside was a bedroom. Children's toys were scattered on the floor. A teddy bear missing an eye. A dollhouse that looked eerily like the Colonial itself. On the far wall, something was drawn in red crayon. No, not crayon. The smell hit him again. Copper blood words. Smeared across the wall. They never left. Suddenly the door slammed shut behind him. Locked. He turned, slamming his fist on it, and when he turned back, the toys were gone. The furniture gone. He wasn't in a room anymore. He was in a void. The walls melted into blackness, and the floor dissolved beneath him. And then he was falling. Falling fast, as though the house had swallowed him whole. He hit the ground hard. Dirt. He was underground. A basement? No, a crawl space. The Fifi. Stench hit him like a wall, rot and mold and death. He raised his light and saw them. Dozens of eyes staring back. Children. Adults. Faces half-formed, twisted in agony, mouths open in silent screams. They were inside the walls, trapped, mummified, into the structure. One of them reached out, a bony hand cracking through the plaster. Then another dozens. They started pulling toward him, dragging themselves free. "Sheriff," they all whispered. "Join us." He screamed. He fired his gun. The muzzle. Flashes lit the horror around him, the faces, the limbs, the blood-streaked wood. But nothing stopped them. Then, when Clint woke, it was morning. He was lying on the ground in front of the Colonial. His cruiser still parked, engine idling. The front door was shut. The house was silent. He got up, bruised and filthy, and staggered back into town. He didn't tell anyone what happened, but he had the phone pulled from the station wall and smashed to bits. And to this day, no one can explain how that direct line, not connected to any grid, no number, no wires, had recorded a call that night, but it had, because the dispatcher played it back, and the scream. It was Clint's. The house sat 2 miles outside El Campo, Texas, down a road that got thinner and rougher the farther you drove, until the blacktop gave up and turned into rutted gravel. And then even that gave way to a dirt path that veered off past barbed wire fences and fields of unpicked cotton. The house had been there for nearly 70 years, a long, narrow shotgun-style structure with a rusted tin roof that buckled in the heat and echoed like a church bell when it rained. But no one remembered it raining the day Sarah Breckenridge went to see the property. The realtor, a mousy woman in her 50s with the nervous energy of someone who drinks too much Diet Coke, had hesitated when Sarah pointed to the listing in the window of the agency. "That one?" the woman asked, squinting. "It's way out past the levee. No neighbors for miles. Tin roof house, right?" "Yeah," Sarah said, tapping the glass. "I like the quiet. Writer's dream." The woman didn't reply for a second. Then, in a voice too casual, she said, "You'll want to bring boots. The ground stays soft out there. Some folks say it never really dries. Old drainage issue, probably nothing serious." But when Sarah pulled up to the house 3 days later in her dusty Subaru, the first thing she noticed was how dry the yard was. Not dry in a healthy, sun-baked way. More like something had sucked the life out of it. The grass was pale yellow and brittle as straw. The ground cracked in long seams. A shattered bird bath lay off to one side, overturned like something had climbed out of it rather than ever perched atop. She let herself in with the keys the agency had mailed, the metal gritty and cold in her hand despite the sun baking down hard enough to ripple the air. Inside, the house smelled stale but not awful. Old wood, maybe some mildew. She'd smelled worse in the New York sublets she'd bounced through the last decade. One long hallway stretched down the middle, rooms off to either side. Tin roof. Above. One window unit in the living room, already buzzing when she flipped the breaker. But what made her stop, really stop, was the sound, not dripping. Not yet. Just something soft, like whispering, like someone muttering in another room, far off. She froze in the hallway, holding her breath. It stopped. Just the house settling, she told herself. Just the breeze rattling a loose screen. By the time she unpacked the truck and hauled her 2 battered suitcases and a box of notebooks inside, the noise was gone. That night, it started to rain. Not outside. Out there, the moon glowed clean and yellow, and the fields shimmered silver like polished bone. But inside, something dripped. Sarah had just brushed her teeth and come into the hallway when she felt a drop hit her scalp. She reached up, fingers brushing her hair. Wet, not sweat. Not warm. She looked up. A slow, deliberate drip hung from the ceiling, forming on a seam in the tin panels. It gleamed slightly, not water clear but darker, thicker. Another drop followed. Splashing onto the hardwood floor with a soft, sticky plop. She turned on every light in the house. Stared up at the ceiling. No leak. No bulge of water-soaked insulation. She climbed a step stool and ran her hand along the tin. Dry. Still. The dripping continued. She tried to sleep that night, headphones in, old jazz playing on low. Around 2 a.m., she took the earbuds out, realizing the music had faded. Her battery had died, and the dripping was louder. She got up and crept into the hallway. Drip, drip, drip. Not just from the ceiling now. From the walls, from the corners. Of the door frames. The air smelled metallic, coppery, and she thought about the bird bath outside. She fetched a flashlight and looked. Closer. What was dripping wasn't water. It was dark red. Almost black in the beam. It trailed in thick, slow drops. And worse, it was coming from inside the seams. As if the house bled from behind its own bones. By morning, it was gone. No stain on the floor. No marks on the ceiling. The tin glinted. Like nothing had happened. Sarah stood in the hallway in her robe, barefoot and confused, half convinced she'd dreamed it. Maybe she'd hit her head on the step stool and not realized it. Maybe she'd passed out and hallucinated. But later, when she stepped outside to get her phone from the car, she didn't like keeping it near the bed lately. Something about the light bothering her. She noticed something on the front. Porch.footprints.bare. Human. Wet. But not muddy. Not water.sticky. Trailing from the front steps to the door. And then, back again. That day she drove to town. She didn't even lock the house. Just left it standing alone under the heat like it always had. She asked around. No one said much. The cashier at the gas station just looked at her too long when she asked about the tin roof house. The man at the hardware store said, "Thought that place burned back in the 90s. Guess not." That night, back at the house, she didn't sleep. She watched the ceiling, and when the first drop came, not red now, but black, thick as oil, she screamed. It didn't stop. It dripped and dripped and dripped, a slow, nauseating rhythm like a leaking pipe in a morgue. But worse than the dripping were the sounds in the walls. Not rodents. Not the scuttling of raccoons. Voices. Soft at first. Then louder. Mumbled. Then clear. Then whispering her name. She ran that night. Left the lights on, the keys still in the door. She drove into El Campo and parked by the police station. Didn't go in. Just sat there. Eventually, a sheriff's deputy knocked on the glass. She rolled the window down halfway. "You okay, ma'am?" She nodded. "Just tired. Needed to get out of the house." He hesitated, then said, "Which house?" She didn't answer. He nodded like he understood anyway. "You hear it dripping yet?" He asked. Her blood went cold. "What?" She whispered. "The inside rain," he said, voice flat. "Happens when it wants. Started sometime after the family disappeared. Sheriff swears he was out there once in daylight. Place was dry as bone. But inside..." He didn't finish. Sarah sold the house to the next buyer who didn't ask questions. Moved back north. Changed her number. Took a job in an office. Stopped writing. But sometimes, in quiet moments, in elevators, empty hallways, hotel rooms, with tin ceilings, she hears it. The drip. She doesn't sleep when she hears it, because she knows it'll find her again. And next time, it won't just be rain. The heat in late July out near Corpus Christi doesn't just sit on your skin, it settles in your bones, makes your head heavy and your eyes burn. The cicadas scream like they're arguing with the sun, and the wind never really comes, not even. At night, the only things that move are the dust devils swirling across the cracked ground and the feuilles de feuillante and the shadows that stretch out from places you don't remember seeing in daylight. Sam and D. Crenshaw bought the trailer on a desperate kind of whim. Sam's last job welding pipelines up in Abilene went dry, and after 6 months of promises from folks who stopped returning calls, they gave up and took their meager savings down to Nueces County. Dee's cousin ran a small produce stand just off the highway and said he could pay them under the table if they didn't mind long hours and bad pay. They didn't mind. What they wanted was a clean start, away from the people who remembered the shouting, the late-night police calls, and that business with Sam's hand and the tire ironed out. The mobile home sat on half an acre of hard-packed dirt, surrounded by mesquite brush and sun-bleached fences that leaned like they were exhausted. It had been there since the 80s, maybe longer, its metal siding warped and speckled with rust. But it was cheap, and the real estate lady said it was a quiet little patch of Texas. That part wasn't a lie. The first week went smooth enough. The AC groaned but worked. Dee decorated the inside with dollar store curtains and old family photos in chipped frames. Sam patched a leaking pipe and got the back porch light to stop flickering. They even found a half-blind shepherd mix wandering the roadside one morning and took him in. Named him Buck. Then came the sound. It started low, like the creak of metal shifting in the sun. But it came at night, 3 most times, just once or twice at first. They figured it was the heat contracting the siding, maybe. A rat inside the walls. Sam knocked around under the kitchen sink and found nothing. Dee heard it again the next night. Then again. A slow groan that vibrated the floorboards, like something heavy was moving through the insulation. Then the bite marks showed up. The first one was on the inside of the pantry door, deep and wide, curved like a grin. Sam stared at it a long time, trying to convince himself it had always been there. But the wood was fresh splintered, with curled shavings around the edges. It looked too organic to be a knife or tool. A couple days later, Dee found a matching mark behind the bathroom door. That one bled. It oozed something dark and tacky, the color of rotten cherries. Smelled like copper and damp leaves. Sam tried to bleach it, but it bubbled under the surface and returned the next morning, twice as wide. They stopped sleeping. Buck stopped barking. He'd started whining at the corner near the TV stand every night, tail tucked, ears flat. By the third night, he pissed himself on the linoleum and refused to go back inside. Dee left water and food out, but Buck wouldn't come close. Then one morning, he didn't come at all. Just gone. Dee walked the dirt path around the trailer and found drag marks in the sand. Claw trails, deep and erratic, disappearing into the scrub brush. That was when the dream started. Dee was the first. She saw herself floating down a hallway that shouldn't have existed, not in any layout of the mobile home. It was too long, too narrow. The walls throbbed, not pulse-throbbed like gums. The wallpaper peeled in strips that fluttered like they were breathing. Something whispered her name from inside the insulation, and she swore it used her maiden name, which no one had spoken in 15 years. When she woke up, her hair was damp. The bed was soaked through. Sam hadn't moved. The whole night, eyes wide open. He said he'd been dreaming of teeth, not mouths. Teeth. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Hanging from the ceiling like stalactites, rooted into meat. They clicked and clacked with each of his steps, snapping inches from his face. Some of them were flat and square, others long and jagged, yellowed. One brushed his cheek. He felt it tear him. When he woke, there was a thin line of blood on his jaw. They tried to leave. Sam packed the truck by noon. Dee didn't even grab half her clothes. They backed out of the dirt drive and didn't look back, but the tires spun in place. The earth was dry, loose. Nothing should have stopped them. Sam got out to look, and the wheels were sunk a foot into the ground, as if they'd been there years. Roots curled around the axles. That night, the trailer shifted, not trembled. Shifted. The floor pitched a few inches toward the back hallway, enough to send a bottle of aspirin rolling under the fridge. Doors refused to stay open. Something growled under the floorboards, not animal, not quite mechanical. The windows fogged over from the outside. That's when they called Pastor Elkins from the roadside chapel up in Bankat. He came with a big wooden cross and a flask of anointing oil. He laid hands on the walls and spoke in tongues. The walls bit him. One long gash across his palm. The wallpaper flapped in silent laughter. He left without saying a word, dropped his Bible in the yard and never came back. The neighbors, what few there were, stopped waving. One old man from across the road shouted something about the land being cursed, about something buried deep, beneath the foundation. Sam threw a rock at him and told him to shut his goddamn mouth. But the old man wasn't wrong. 3 days later, Dee found the original property records tucked inside a crack in the back closet. Yellowed paper, brittle as onion skin. Handwritten notes from the county in the 60s. The trailer had once been a hunting lodge before it burned down. Before that, It was a tenant shack for the nearby cotton fields. Before that, nothing. No structure listed. Just unfit for residence written 3 times in red ink. One more dream. Sam woke in the hallway. He didn't remember falling asleep. The floor pulsed under his feet, and the hallway was longer again. Much longer. He tried to walk, but the floor was slick. Wet. With what? He didn't know. He looked up. There were teeth. Dozens. Some human. Some not. Some the size of a dog's. Skull. They jutted out of the ceiling, the walls, the floor. They were growing. He turned, and behind him, the trailer was gone. Just open gum-colored darkness. He screamed himself awake. D was already gone. Vanished. No blood. No note. The front door still locked from the inside. Her photo on the fridge had teeth marks through the eyes. Sam tried to burn it. He soaked the place in gasoline, lit a match, and watched it catch. For 5 glorious seconds, he saw flames leap into the night. Then the trailer screamed. The fire died in an instant, like breath snuffed it out. Sam stumbled back, fell, hit his head on the bumper of the truck. When he came to, the trailer was closer. Inches from his face. It had moved. He ran. They found him 6 miles away, naked, babbling. Said the ground was alive. Said he saw walls moving under the dirt. Sighed he couldn't hear his own thoughts anymore because she's in there now. They locked him up in the regional hospital. The trailer is still there. New folks tried to move in last spring. A couple with a baby. They didn't even last a week. Now the siding's warped further, and the windows look darker, like eyes sunk into a skull. But if you walk real quiet around it, just before dawn, you might hear chewing. Something slow. Wet. And if you knock, it knocks back. The lake was calm as glass that morning. No wind, no wake. Just a soft orange mist creeping off the surface like breath from a sleeping mouth. It was early, not quite dawn, but close enough that the hills still wore their long shadows, and the cypress trees on the edge of the water looked like black pillars holding up the sky. Down below the bluff, nestled where the land bent toward the inlet, Saturday the old house, white wood, wide porch, gabled roof, the kind of place built for summer joy. But that wasn't what they found. Lena Myers was the one who made the call. She worked the front desk at a nearby resort and sometimes took her morning walks past the lake houses, just to feel the cool air and watch the deer dart across the road. She noticed the front door was ajar, just barely, not blown open but hanging there, like someone left in a rush. That was odd, but not unheard of. What made her stop cold was the boat, a little aluminum rowboat, painted blue once upon a time, now chipped and flaking to reveal the metal beneath. It bobbed, gentle-like, maybe 3 or 4 feet from the dock. But the thing was, the water was dead still. Not a ripple in sight. No birds, no frogs, no bugs even. Just that boat, rocking, back and forth. As if someone had just stood up from it. As if someone had just climbed out. Sheriff Dwayne Caldwell didn't believe in ghosts, but even he couldn't explain it. He got there just before 7 a.m. after Lena's call, and the air was still cool enough to see his breath. His deputy, Wes Harper, was fresh out of academy and twitchy with his hand always near his holster. They made their way through the house. No signs of struggle, no broken glass, no blood. The table was set for 2. Coffee cups on the counter, both half full. The TV in the living room was still on, static humming like a low whisper. Upstairs, the bed was made. The closet was open, clothes on hangers like the owners had just stepped out to get groceries. The house belonged to Alan and Denise Travers. They were both teachers from Austin, had bought the place for weekend getaways. According to neighbors, they hadn't mentioned having any guests. No kids, no parties. Just the two of them. The last confirmed sighting was Friday evening. Alan had stopped by a gas station for a six-pack and some firewood. Said they were going to make s'mores and watch the stars. That was it. No one had seen or heard from them since Dot Caldwell. Stood on the back porch, staring at the boat. Still rocking. Wind must have done it, Wes mumbled. There's no wind, Caldwell replied. They pulled the boat in. Inside was a wet blanket, folded neatly, and a small brown teddy bear. One eye missing, fur matted. It didn't belong to the Travers, far as anyone knew. No children, no visitors, no explanation, but Caldwell didn't like it. Something about that bear made the hair on his arms rise. Over the next few days, they dragged the lake. Nothing. No bodies, no clothes, no signs anyone had gone in. The forensics team dusted the house top to bottom. No fingerprints other than Alan and Denise's. No forced entry, no blood. No sign of foul play, but still. The boat rock got locals started whispering. That's what small towns do. Marble. Falls had stories like anywhere in Texas. Stories about the lake, about the cliffs, about a girl who drowned herself back in 1961 after her baby was taken from her. They said she walked the banks some nights, crying and singing lullabies into the wind. Caldwell dismissed it all as ghost tale nonsense. But when Lena found her cat drowned in the bird bath, fur soaked, mouth wide open like it had been screaming, she stopped walking past the lake house. The rocking didn't stop. Even when Caldwell had it roped to the dock, the boat moved, not wildly, not fast, just that same slow, deliberate sway. Back and forth, like breath. Then came the phone calls. Denise's sister in San Antonio got a voicemail at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Nothing but silence. For a moment, then a soft splash, and the faint sound of something wet being dragged across wood. Caldwell listened to that voicemail 10 times in a row, trying to convince himself it was a prank or a glitch. But something about it felt wrong. The sound of the splash wasn't distant. It was close, intimate, like the phone had been pressed to the floorboards of the dock. The following weekend, Wes vanished. He had taken his patrol truck out by the lake just to make a few notes on his report. At least that's what the logbook said. Last anyone heard from him was a text to his girlfriend. Rocking again. That's it. They found the truck parked by the path, engine cold. His notebook was on the dash. Inside the front seat, water droplets, too many to make sense. No rain. That night, no dew, just wet footprints. Bare dot the next morning, the boat rocked harder. Caldwell started staying up late, sitting across from the lake house in his cruiser, staring at that damn boat. He didn't drink much anymore, but he kept. A flask now, and a gun in his lap. It made him feel less crazy. The house remained untouched, sealed off after Wes disappeared. But every now and then, the TV flickered on inside. Just static, or sometimes music. A lullaby, maybe, always faint. Always at night. That was when Caldwell decided to go in one. Last time, Dot, it was September 3rd. The wind had finally come, but only inland. By the lake, it was still. Thick. Heavy with silence. Caldwell stepped onto the dock. The boat rocked once, then stopped. He stepped into it, Dot. There was no motor, no oars. Just that folded blanket, and the bear. The moment he sat down, the boat moved. Not drifting. It moved. As if pulled, Dot, it glided across the surface, smooth and straight, toward the middle of the lake. Caldwell's flashlight flickered. He gripped it tighter. Then he heard it. A splash, to his right. Then another, left. Then behind him, louder. Like someone treading water, Dot, he turned in every direction. Nothing. Then the boat stopped. Dead center of the lake, no movement. No wind. Then came the knock. It came from beneath the boat. Once, then twice. Caldwell's breath caught in his throat, then slowly. The boat began to fill, not with water, but with cold. It started in his feet, crept up his legs like frostbite. Then a whisper, soft, delicate, like a woman singing to a child. He dropped the flashlight. It rolled to the side. And in that moment of darkness, he felt it, a hand, small and wet, gripping his ankle. They found the boat 3 days later, empty, rocking. And still to this day, the lake is still. The house is empty, but the little blue boat never stops rocking. The house sat on the edge of Uvalde, tucked behind a crooked gate and a fence that leaned like it was tired of holding up secrets. No one knew when the last family had left, only that they had left fast. Curtains still hung in the windows, sun-bleached and brittle. A rocking chair sat on the porch, facing the yard where grass had swallowed the stepping stones whole. The mailbox was stuffed with old flyers turned brown at the edges. There were no for sale signs, no trespassing notices, just silence so thick it made your ears ache when you stepped too close. People didn't talk about the house, but they felt it. Teenagers dared each other to throw rocks at the windows, but never went past the gate. Dogs barked when led too close. Lights flickered in nearby homes when the wind blew from that direction. Carmen Alvarez never believed in that kind of thing. She was 27, worked at the county clerk's office, and had just inherited the place from a great-aunt she'd only met once as a child. She remembered the woman's smell more than her face, lavender, mothballs, and something sour underneath. Carmen had come back to Uvalde to clean the house, fix it up, maybe sell it. She needed the money, student loans, a busted radiator. A break from Austin, where things had felt too loud lately, too close. Uvalde, with its slower air and thick heat, promised quiet. She moved in on a Tuesday, armed with Clorox, a sleeping bag, and her abuela's rosary just in case. The house smelled old and sweet, like forgotten perfume. Most of the furniture had been covered in white sheets. When she pulled them off, the dust came with it in fat clouds that stuck to her sweat. The living room was frozen in time, pale. Green walls, a floral couch, yellowed lampshades. On the far wall, above the fireplace, was a tall mirror in a dark wooden frame. It was the only thing not covered in cloth. The mirror was ugly, not in the way things age, but in a way that felt intentional. The glass wasn't clean. It was rippled, like water on a hot road. The frame was carved with shapes she didn't understand. Not flowers, not leaves. Something, curling, snaking. The mirror looked old enough to be from another century, the kind of thing you'd find in a museum or a funeral home that hadn't updated its decor since the Depression. She avoided it at first, not on purpose. Just busy, unpacking, dusting, opening windows that screamed in protest. But that night, she couldn't sleep. The heat clung to her skin like syrup. Crickets chirped in a rhythm that sounded almost deliberate, like ticking. At around 2 a.m., she got up to get water and wandered past the living room, and she looked, just a glance, just to make sure nothing had moved. Her reflection was there, pale, tired, her black hair a frizzy halo in the moonlight. But then she blinked, and it changed. It was still her, but not alive. Her face slack, her mouth slightly open. Skin gray-blue, a dark smear across her throat. One eye bulged more than the other, the white of it yellowing at the edges. Her body, her own body, slumped backward in a chair she hadn't sat in. She gasped and stumbled back, knocking over the lamp. When she looked again, it was just her, normal, breathing hard, eyes wild. Carmen didn't sleep that night. She told herself it was stress. The heat, Maybe she hadn't eaten enough. But she couldn't stop thinking about that version of herself. The coloring, the position, the smear. Her body as a thing. The next morning, she almost called a friend to come stay, but the shame of sounding crazy stopped her. She worked, cleaned, ate takeout, sat on the porch with a beer and tried to pretend she wasn't scared. That night, she didn't mean to look again, but she did, and it was different. This time she was lying in the hallway, face down, blood smeared across the hardwood. One shoe missing. Her fingers bent at wrong angles. Her neck twisted too far to the side. Her eyes open, staring at the baseboards. She screamed. Threw a cloth over the mirror. Paced the room for an hour. She should have left right then, but where would she go? Her car wasn't running right. She didn't have the money for a hotel. Uvalde was small, and she wasn't ready to explain what she'd seen to anyone. Over the next 3 days it happened again, and again. Always different. Always violent. Herself drowned in the bathtub. Herself hanging from the attic beam. Herself teeth shattered, tongue missing, arms bound with rosary beads. She tried covering the mirror with more than cloth. A blanket, duct tape, even a tarp from the shed out back. But something always pulled it down. Sometimes it would just fall. Sometimes she'd walk into the room and find it neatly folded on the couch. She even tried smashing it with a hammer. The glass didn't crack, not even a hairline. The metal bounced back like it had hit rubber. She stopped sleeping. Her skin broke out in hives. Her gums bled when she brushed. Her phone stopped working. Signal came and went, but even when it showed full bars, her calls never went through. People said they couldn't hear her, just static or sobbing. Once, someone claimed they heard two voices, hers and someone else's. Carmen started writing notes, leaving the front door open, in case someone came, in case she needed to run. She looked in the mirror one last time on Sunday. She didn't want to. She had planned to leave, walk to town if she had to, but when she passed it, drawn like a moth to flame, she saw the reflection waiting. This time she was in the living room again. But she wasn't alone. A man stood behind her, tall, gaunt, naked except for something black wrapped around his mouth. Not cloth, not leather, something. Moving, worm-like. His hands were wrapped around her throat. Her eyes were bulging. Again, her lips purple. One shoe was off. Blood had run down from her ear. She turned around, real time. Nothing there. She ran outside. Ran barefoot down the driveway, gravel cutting into her solace. Ran until the house was out of sight. A neighbor, an old man with cataracts and a shotgun on his porch, took her in. Gave her water. Called her a cab. She never went back. 2 months later, the house burned down in the middle of the night. Firefighters said it started in the living room. Electrical, maybe. Except the power had been off since she left. Nothing. Inside survived. Except a mirror. They found it lying flat in the ashes, completely untouched. They put it in the evidence locker at the Uvalde PD, but no one wanted to catalog it. The officer assigned to it left the force a week later. Claimed he saw something that made him understand the ending. Understand what? He wouldn't say. Carmen moved to another state. Changed her name. She still wakes up sometimes gasping. Still avoids her own reflection in store windows, puddles, even her phone screen. She hasn't used a mirror since, but sometimes, in the middle of the night, when the power's out and the shadows are thick, she swears she can feel a cold ripple in the air behind her, like breath. Like someone watching. Waiting. For her to look again. The trailer sat alone on a lot at the end of Ridge Hollow Road, surrounded by waist-high grass that swayed in the dry Wichita Falls wind like a warning. It had been there for decades, A pale blue single-wide, rust eating at the edges, windows. Smoked yellow from years of cigarette haze or something worse. The kind of trailer people pass by without really seeing. The kind the city forgot to condemn and the owner forgot to sell. It looked abandoned. Even before things started. It started with the screams. First, people thought it was a domestic dispute. Then maybe some teenagers partying, playing a prank, messing with the neighborhood. It was summer, and Wichita Falls always ran a little strange in the heat. But by the third night, when the screaming came again, sharp, blood-curdling, rising in a long howl that scraped the sky, folks on the street started to realize it wasn't normal. 2:07 a.m. every night. Always the same. A long, agonized scream. Then silence. Then, sometimes, a wet sound. Like something dragging across linoleum. A thump. Then nothing. By the second week, nobody on Ridge Hollow slept well. People called the police, of course, and the police came. They came 5 times. Each time, the report came back the same. No one inside. No signs of forced entry. No sound upon arrival. Possible prank. But no cop stayed for more than 5 minutes. One young patrolman named Caswell went in by himself on the third call. He came out shaking, eyes wide, mouth slack like a man who had looked at something too long. He put in for transfer the next morning. Moved to Weatherford a week later. Wouldn't. Say why. The city sent a notice to the owner, a man named Lonnie Eller, who hadn't been seen in almost 5 years. The deed still had his name, but the mail piled up. No response. Nobody had seen him move out. Nobody had seen him at all. Just vanished. By the third week, houses on the block went up for sale. Fast, but not all of them. There were those who stayed. Folks too old or too poor to leave. And a few who were just plain curious. One of them was Ron Ellis, a recently laid-off lineman living 2 doors down. Big guy. Always smelled like diesel. Thought the whole thing was overblown. Called it redneck ghost stories for bored folks with internet. That changed the night he decided to sit outside and record the trailer. He sat up in a folding chair across the street, beer in hand, iPhone balanced on his chest, waiting. At 2:07, the screaming started and kept going, longer than usual, louder. It didn't trail off like before. It rose, higher and higher, the kind of sound that forces you to look away from whatever you're doing. A sound that claws at your spine. Ron didn't look away. He kept filming. He even got up, crossed the street, and walked toward the trailer. With the camera light on, the neighbors said they saw him knock. Then open the door. Then disappear inside. The door didn't close. But Ron never came back out. The next morning, the camera was found in the grass. The last 10 seconds of the video, those that weren't corrupted, showed the camera dropping to the ground at an angle, still filming the open doorway. Inside, something moved. Not a person. Something too tall and too thin. Something that shimmered like oil on water. Police came again. Said the place was empty. No sign of Ron, but people heard the scream again that night. This time, they swore it was his voice. The city finally condemned the property, or tried to. The inspector assigned to do the report was named Linda Pearson, 42, divorced, practical woman. She showed up with a clipboard, a camera, and a weariness that came from 15 years of paperwork and city nonsense. She made it halfway, up the front steps before she stopped. Neighbors said she stood there for a long time, just looking at the door. Then she turned around, got in her truck, and drove away. 2 days later, her truck was found parked by the Wichita River, keys still in the ignition, purse on the seat. No sign of her. Her clipboard was found under the truck. Only one word written on the report: listening. The town didn't talk about the trailer anymore. After a while, it just became part of the background, a rotten tooth in the mouth. Of the street, the grass grew high again. The windows darkened, but the screaming never stopped, not even once, even after the city tore it down. That's the part that broke people. They brought in a crew from Amarillo, 3 trucks and a bulldozer. They stripped the place to the bones, hauled away the panels, the floors, the busted couch, the mattress with the stains no one could name. They raised the lot, salted it, fenced it off at 2:07 a.m. that night. There was nothing there but dirt, and the screaming came again, louder than ever. One worker, the foreman, an older man named Jasper, shot himself in the motel that night. Left a note that simply said, "It got out." Now, the scream moves. Sometimes it's a block away, sometimes across town. Sometimes it's not just a scream, but whispering under your bed or behind the bathroom mirror. Wichita Falls knows that sound now, like a memory you wish you could forget, like a hand brushing your shoulder when you're sure you're alone. The lot on Ridge Hollow stays empty, but no one walks past it after dark. And if you're ever in Wichita Falls and you find yourself awake at 2:07 a.m., don't open your window. Don't listen too hard, because if you do, you might hear it too, the screaming, and maybe, just maybe, it hears you back. The house at the end of East Star Avenue in the Cogdaches had stood longer than anyone could remember, though no one in town could say with certainty who built it. Some said it belonged to a former Confederate colonel who vanished after the war. Others whispered about a French doctor who dabbled in mesmerism and brought the house with him in blueprints, stained with strange symbols. But none of that was in the town records. No names, no deeds. Just a black and white photo in the library archives dated 1896, showing the same house standing exactly as it does today, gables tall, porch wide, and a crooked iron weather vane. Shaped like a serpent spinning even on still days, the Victorian stood behind a veil of sycamore and willow, its second-floor windows looking out like tired, dark eyes. No one had lived there for decades, though someone or something kept it. Clean, no ivy crept up its bones. No shutters hung loose. And every window, every pane of glass, every piece of mirror inside had been scrubbed so clean it should have blinded you in sunlight, only they didn't shine. They didn't reflect. That was the first thing Evan noticed when he moved in. He wasn't from the Cogdaches. He'd driven up from Houston after the divorce, burned out and raw, looking for peace or maybe just escape. The listing online described the mansion as a historical gem in need of a caretaker with no rent, just free. Accommodation in return for occupancy and bi-weekly maintenance reports. That sounded like paradise to Evan, who was broke and tired of his own name. He didn't even ask why a house like that would be free. The owner never showed. Just a manila envelope waiting in the mailbox with the key, a set of instructions typed. In all caps, lock all doors before dark, and a hand-drawn map of the house's interior. The last line simply read, "Do not use the mirrors, cover them immediately." But when Evan stepped inside, none of the mirrors worked anyway. He first noticed it in the hallway just past the foyer. There was a tall, gilt-framed mirror at the end, cracked slightly at the top like a fracture in ice. But when he passed in front of it, there was nothing there. No image, no shadow. Just an empty hallway stretching behind him, as if he hadn't come home at all. He touched the glass. Cold like a window in winter, but nothing changed. He waved his hand. Nothing. No reflection. He chalked it up to some old trick of light, maybe a silvering issue. He wasn't an expert. The house had a dozen mirrors, all different shapes and styles. Antique vanities with clawfoot stools, full-length ones bolted into closet doors, and strange beveled glass mounted above fireplaces. Not a single one showed him back, he figured. Maybe they were just ornamental. Rich folks were weird like that. The nights were quiet for the first week, though he slept poorly. Every dream faded before he could recall it, and sometimes he'd wake up with a taste in his mouth like copper, as if he'd been chewing on a penny. But he liked the silence. It felt like a kind of healing. But it didn't last. On the 8th night, he began forgetting simple things. His phone passcode, his ex-wife's birthday. He opened his journal and saw blank pages where he swore he'd written just the day before. Worse, he stood in the mirrorless bathroom, toothbrush in hand, and couldn't remember if he'd already brushed. He had no taste in his mouth, no scent, nothing to remind him of who he was, and every time he passed a mirror, even one he'd covered with a bedsheet or an old towel, he felt this pull in his gut like the memory of falling. Not the fall itself, just the fear stretched out like something that never ended. Then came the noise. At exactly 13 a.m. each night, a single sharp knock echoed from somewhere inside the house. Not the front door, not the back, not even the basement. Just one knock, heavy, deliberate, like someone closing a coffin lid. It woke Evan every time, and no matter how quickly he moved, he could never find the source. He started recording the nights with his phone. By the 3rd night, the audio file caught something else, a voice whispering so softly it barely registered above the silence. "I see you," it said, "but you're not here." He stopped listening after that. The house began changing. Not physically. Walls didn't shift and floors didn't rot, but subtly. Like he'd wake up and find the bedroom curtains open when he knew he'd shut them, or that the light bulbs had turned to warm yellow when he remembered them being bright white. He stopped being sure if the master bedroom had ever had a fireplace, even though it now crackled faintly in the early morning hours, but it was the mirrors that truly began to unnerve him. One morning, while brushing his teeth, he looked up to the covered bathroom mirror and saw movement beneath the sheet. A flicker. Not like a reflection, but like something trapped behind the glass, pressing against it. The outline of a man, but not Evan, taller, thinner, and smiling. He ripped the sheet down. The mirror showed nothing. That day, he packed. He wasn't going to wait for something worse. But when he reached the front door, his keys weren't in his coat pocket or his bag. He checked the kitchen, the bathroom, every counter. He checked his memory. And there was nothing, not even a hint of how he got there. He sat on the staircase for an hour, his name fluttering just out of reach in the back of his mind like a moth batting against glass. He remembered a city, Houston, a woman, maybe Jessica or Janine, but not his own name, not his age, not his face. He ran to the hallway mirror. Empty. He pressed both palms against the glass and screamed. Nothing came out. His mouth opened, he knew that much. But no sound escaped. The hall remained quiet. His hands left no smudge. He tried again. And again. And then the mirror smiled. It didn't show his face or anything human. Just the faintest stretch of lips, too wide, too thin, pulling back in the dark like some animal waiting beneath ice. The smile cracked the glass further. And behind that, shadows moved. Many. All watching. That was 3 weeks ago, he thinks. Time inside the mansion no longer works right. He finds food on the table but never sees who brings it. The journal on his nightstand has writing now, though none of it is in his handwriting. Just phrases, looped and scratched, over and over. To stay is to forget. To look is to lose. Someone else's home. He still walks the halls, still checks the mirrors. Each time he does, he forgets a little more. He doesn't know what day it is, or month, or what he looked like before the reflections vanished. He barely remembers his own voice. And now, when he walks past the parlor mirror, the tall, ornate one he once tried to cover, he sees someone. Not himself, but a man, sitting on the staircase with his face buried in his hands, muttering something Evan can't hear. A man who looks terrified. A man who just yesterday he could have sworn was him. The rain had stopped around midnight, but Borden Street still glistened with the oily shimmer that clung to cracked sidewalks and broken curbs, the streetlights flickering in a way that made everything look older than it really was. The duplex sat at the end of the street like a missing tooth forgotten, a little crooked, with shutters that never quite closed and a mailbox that hadn't been checked in weeks. The lower tenant, a middle-aged woman named Angie Suarez, had called the property manager 3 times in a month about the noises above her. Each time, she'd been told the same thing. He's quiet, pays rent on time, doesn't cause trouble. Probably just has insomnia. But Angie knew insomnia didn't sound like dragging furniture at 3:14 a.m. or the steady creak of floorboards, like someone pacing for hours, or the wet, slapping sound that she swore came through her ceiling last Thursday like someone was wringing out a sponge soaked in meat. The upstairs tenant's name was Raymond Poe, and nobody ever saw him. Not once. The rent was paid electronically. Packages showed up on the porch addressed to him: books, old VHS tapes, stacks of yellowed newspaper bundled with twine. But the motion light never came on. No footsteps up the front stairs. No shadow behind the curtains. Angie had taken to standing in the driveway just to see if she could catch a glimpse of movement behind those pale blue drapes, but it wasn't. Until the smell came that people started to listen. It wasn't the usual kind of dead smell. Not rot, not mildew. It was sweet, at first sickly, cloying like sugared meat. Then it soured. It came through the vents, it leaked through the walls. Angie called the gas company. They found nothing. She called pest control. They found no rats. She even called the cops. They knocked twice, waited, and left a card. Then, 2 days later, someone else called. A new couple had moved into the house next door. They were laying sod when they saw something from their second-floor window, something moving behind the curtains of Raymond Poe's apartment. It was a hand. Just one. Pale, trembling, reaching up like it was trying to claw its way through the glass. They called the police. Again, the officers broke down the door at 10:42 p.m. Angie watched from the driveway, arms crossed tight, heart crawling up her throat. She half expected Raymond to come down the stairs, blinking against the sudden light, maybe with a confused smile and a story about food poisoning or a bad fall. But no one came down. The officers were up there for an hour, then 2. Then a third patrol car arrived. Then a coroner's van. The police wouldn't talk to her, but one of the crime scene techs did, sealed inside the wall, he muttered, while lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. Jesus Christ, still warm. Raymond Poe's body was discovered inside the east-facing wall of the bedroom behind the closet. Drywall removed cleanly, insulation pulled back and then resealed with new screws, fresh spackle. Whoever had done it had taken their time. No signs of struggle, no blood trail, no forced entry. The only problem was this: the apartment was locked from the inside, deadbolt latched, security chain intact, and no fingerprints in the entire unit. None. Not on the fridge, not on the doorknobs, not even Raymond's. The only thing they did find were notes. Hundreds of them, crammed inside drawers, taped under chairs, pinned to the back of picture frames. Scribbled in a frantic, looping hand. The wall is hungry. It wants me. I'm sorry I fed IT before. It never forgets a meal. I shouldn't have. Angie moved out 2 days later. She didn't even pack. Just walked out, got in her car, and drove to her sister's in Corpus. The place was empty for 6 months. Then a man named Travis moved in upstairs. Young guy, former Marine, Worked nights as a security guard at the mall. Seemed stable. Laughed a lot. Said the rumors didn't scare him. He lasted 10 days. On the 11th night, the landlord got a call. Travis had left 43 voicemails on the emergency maintenance line, all in the span of 4 hours. The first few were calm. Something scratching in the walls. Thought it was a possum. The next ones were more urgent. He said he saw fingers pushing through the drywall. Said he heard someone whispering his name from inside the floor. Then came the last 3. They were quiet. No words. Just breathing. Shallow. Wet. And something else tapping. Steadily, like fingernails on wood. When they arrived, the apartment was locked again. They found the bedroom closet torn apart. Holes in the wall. Bits of skin on the plaster. Clumps of black hair embedded in the insulation. But no blood. No body. No sign of Travis at all. Only a single note. Taped to the wall. It knows you're watching. IT watches. BACK. The police chalked it up to drugs? Stress. Hallucinations? Maybe. Travis ran off. Maybe Raymond was a suicide, but something about the warmth of that first body lingered. Something about the way the drywall had been smoothed down with care. Something about the fact that every time the unit goes empty, the neighbors start hearing things again, dragging sounds, wet tapping, a voice calling from behind the vents. And then something worse, the smell, the sweet one. The one like sugared meat. Borden Street's gone quieter since. The duplex sits mostly dark. The top unit hasn't stayed filled for longer than a few weeks at a time. But last month, Angie got a letter. No return address. Just one sentence written in that same frantic hand. I never stopped feeding it. She burned the letter in the kitchen sink. But even in Corpus, sometimes at night, she swears she hears it again. That sound, fingernails on wood. Coming from the walls. The sun was glaring over Brenham, a cruel kind of heat that made the cows swat flies with bone-tired tails and the fence posts sweat creosote. Heat shimmered off the blacktop in warping waves, the kind of day where you could smell your own skin. Roasting. It was late June, and every air conditioner in the county was running loud enough to drown out the birdsong. Peter and Laurel Deeks pulled into the driveway of the old farmhouse just after 3 p.m. in their sputtering Corolla. The engine coughed like it had TB and died with a sad wheeze. Peter twisted the key again. Nothing. Dead. She's done, Peter said, wiping sweat from his temple. Goddamn thing finally gave up. Laurel stared at the house. We should have. Turned back in Hempstead. You saw that road sign. Whole damn thing looked like it melted. Peter popped the door open and stepped into the heat, already regretting the denim he'd worn. Just need a place to cool off. We can figure out the car after. The house ahead of them looked abandoned. 2 stories, pale green siding faded to near white in the sun, wraparound porch with one rocker gently moving though no wind stirred. A wind chime hung above the door, tinkling softly as if touched by invisible fingers. There was no driveway, just gravel swallowed by crabgrass, and the mailbox out front said Martinez in blocky letters. Laurel was slower to get out. It's weird, Pete. Why would anyone live way out here, middle of nothing? You said it was an Airbnb? I said it was listed as one. No one's rented it since 2018. The air was thick, but something was off. It didn't smell like Texas. Heat, no dust, no manure, no dry grass baking under a mean sun. It smelled faintly of peppermint, and something sweeter underneath. Like cake frosting left out too long. As they stepped up onto the porch, the temperature dropped. Slightly at first, enough to make the skin prickle. Peter tried the doorknob. It turned without resistance. Laurel, he whispered, it's open. Inside, the air was cool. Not air-conditioned. Just cold. Still. They stepped into a hallway, narrow and lined with family photos. All black and white. All the faces blurred. Not from age or damage, but as if smeared deliberately. One woman's eyes had been rubbed into long charcoal streaks. A baby's mouth looked like it had been cut out with scissors. Laurel turned. Did you feel that? What? Cold. Like it came up from under the floor. Peter didn't answer. He was looking down at the hardwood planks. A tiny white speck had landed on his boot. He bent down, picked it up, a snowflake dot. Impossible. But there it was, melting between his fingers even though his skin felt like ice. Laurel gasped behind him, pointing at the window. Pete, look. Outside the lawn was going white. Not with frost, not. With dust, not with cottonwood. Snow. Thick, tumbling flakes the size of quarters. In June, in Texas. And worse, they weren't normal. They had faces. Tiny, writhing, weeping faces. Every flake. Infants screaming silently. Old men grimacing in agony. Women with their mouths sewn shut. The kind of faces you see in your dreams. And pretend you don't remember in the morning. Peter grabbed Laurel's hand. Back to the car. But when they stepped out onto the porch, the world had gone quiet. Too quiet. Their Corolla was gone. No, not gone, buried. Buried in snow that rose like a perfect dome over it. The shape of the car still visible under the white crust. The windshield was completely opaque with frost, and jagged ice crystals ran. Like spiderwebs across the mirrors and lights. Peter staggered toward it, but the snow cracked underfoot like bones. When he kicked through a layer, he didn't find slush or mud. He found skin. Laurel screamed. Under the snow, dozens of limbs were. Frozen mid-crawl, small arms like a child's stretched upward. Fingers curled like claws, and beneath them, something was moving. The snow rippled. Something was alive under it. Peter grabbed Laurel and ran. Not back into the house, down the gravel road. But it wasn't gravel anymore. It was linoleum, checker-tiled. Linoleum like a kitchen floor, stretching for miles, cracked and stained with something darker than oil. He stopped. Bent down. Touched it. The tiles pulsed. The smell came stronger now, peppermint and frosting, and under it, rotting meat. A party that had gone on too long. A cake that had been sliced and served, but no one came to eat. They turned. The farmhouse. Behind them was different now. It was larger. The porch had grown longer, curling around both sides like arms. The windows were eyes, black and watching, and from inside, something sang. A child's voice, off-key, dragging each word like a violin, played with a rusted knife. Happy birthday, dear. The name changed every time. Sometimes it said Laurel, sometimes Peter. Once it said Mommy. They walked backwards slowly. The snow came again. Falling straight down, no wind, each flake a face. They didn't melt this time. They landed and stuck, pressing against skin, sucking out warmth. Peter felt his teeth chatter. Laurel's lips were turning blue. The road was gone, nothing but snow and the farmhouse. The wind chime above the door was ringing wildly now, though the air was still. Peter's voice was barely a whisper. It's not real. Laurel shook her head. It is. It's been waiting. It knew we'd come. How? Because of me. Peter stared. Laurel's eyes were empty. She smiled, just a bit too wide. I used to live here. And then she stepped backward. Onto the porch. The door opened without her touching it. Peter ran. He didn't know where, just away. Through the snow. The faces biting at him, whispering in a language he couldn't understand but felt. He ran until his legs stopped working. When the sheriff found him the next day, he was lying on the edge of County Road 42, mouthful of snow, pupils blown wide. Sunburned skin blistering, frostbite on his fingers. Clothes frozen to his body. Laurel was never found. The Corolla sat in impound untouched. No frost, no snow, no footprints, just a faint smell of peppermint and something sweeter underneath. And inside the trunk, carefully folded into the spare tire well, was a snowflake. It looked just like her face. It was a rental. That's what made it easy. When it's not your place, you don't ask too many questions. You put up with strange plumbing or creaky floors because you'll be gone in a few weeks. And when you're running from something or someone, it's easier to blend into a new place than explain why your hands won't stop shaking when you hear certain sounds. Miranda had picked the house in Galveston because it was cheap, available on short notice, and the pictures on the listing made it look like the kind of place she could disappear inside. It sat just 2 blocks from the beach, one of those old salt-worn houses with the second story raised on concrete pillars and a broad porch sagging from too many years of sun and sea spray. The paint was the color of bleached coral flaking off, in wide, dry curls like skin after a burn. Something about that looked familiar to her. Not comforting, just familiar. She checked in on a Friday afternoon. The air so heavy with humidity she felt like she was drinking it through her nose. The realtor had been oddly terse, just handed her the key from a rusted tin box, muttered something about high tide schedules, and said, "Don't leave food out." Then he left. No signature, no walkthrough. Inside, the house smelled of brine and mildew. Even with the windows shut, the sea was everywhere and the dampness of the wood. In the crust on the windowsills, in the way the floorboards squelched when she stepped too hard. But it was quiet, and it was empty, and that's all Miranda wanted. That. First night, she woke up at midnight to the sound of something sloshing. She sat up in bed, heart thudding, and listened. It wasn't rain. There was no wind. The air outside was still, the kind of fixed stillness only Texas coastal nights knew, like the sky itself was pressing down, holding its breath. But something was moving. She slid her legs over the edge of the mattress and felt it immediately, cold water lapping over her bare feet. Salt, sharp, biting cold that didn't belong in summer. She jerked the bedside lamp on. The floor was covered in seawater. It stretched from wall to wall, glimmering faintly in the soft light. Threads of seaweed tangled around the legs of the dresser. Sand clung to the baseboards. The room should have been tilted, should have had some leak or flood source, but the water sat perfectly even, as if the sea itself had crept in through the walls. Miranda stepped back onto the bed, her breath hitching in her throat. The water was only about an inch deep, maybe 2, but it moved, not from her, not from any motion she could see. It rippled in a slow, rhythmic pulse, like something breathing beneath it. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, the water was gone. No puddles, no dampness, not even a salt ring. The floors were dry. Her socks stayed white. She chalked it up to exhaustion. Maybe she'd spilled something. Maybe the damp in the wood played tricks on her. She cleaned up the stray seaweed without thinking, flushed it down the old toilet, and told herself she'd imagined the whole thing. But the next night, it happened. Again. Midnight. Slosh. This time it came with a smell. Not just salt and seaweed, something deeper. Something like rot. Like dead fish baking in the sun. When she opened her eyes, the water was already there, shin deep, and rising. She waded to the door, trying not to look at the dark corners where the seaweed gathered in knots. The doorknob was slick with salt. When she pulled it open, the hallway beyond was just as flooded. Water gleamed up the stairs. A cold draft blew through the hallway even though all the windows were closed. She could hear something out there, beyond the walls, waves crashing too close, much too close, like the shore had crept right up against the siding, and then came the whisper. It started low, bubbling, like someone speaking underwater. Then louder. A name. She thought it was hers, but not quite. Like someone trying to remember it but getting it wrong. Miranda had heard voices before. Real ones, cruel ones, begging ones, but this one slithered. It didn't ask. It beckoned. She backed into the bedroom and slammed the door. The water was higher now, just beneath her knees. It pulsed again. She saw something move through it, something. Long and sinuous, like the tail of an eel, disappearing beneath the bed. She didn't scream. She couldn't. She crawled onto the mattress and curled up in the center, clutching the bed sheets like they could anchor her to the dry world. And then the whisper. Stop. Silence. She waited. The water ebbed. When she looked again, the floor was dry. By the fifth night, she stopped pretending it was a dream. Every night at midnight, the house filled with seawater. Always ice cold. Always rising to her knees, sometimes higher. The whispers became more distinct, but still warped, spoken through waterlogged mouths. She began to hear weeping, breathing. Once, she saw a face, just below the surface, staring up at her. Eyes open, mouth slack. Hair swaying like kelp. When she blinked, it was gone. Miranda started keeping a flashlight beside her bed. She wrapped towels around her ankles to stay warm. She unplugged the wall sockets and raised her things off the floor. She even set an alarm for 11:50 p.m. each night, just to be ready, but nothing prepared her for the night the water didn't come alone. It started the same. Midnight, slosh, the slow crawl of icy seawater, the rotting stench, the whisper. But then came the knock. A single, wet thud on the front door. Then again. And again. She crept through the flooded hallway. The water was up to her thighs. Each step was like wading through molasses. Something tugged at her pajama pants. She didn't look down. At the front door, she stopped. The knock came again, harder now, louder, not like knuckles, like something soft, something boneless. She put her hand on the knob. It turned on its own. The door swung open, and the sea rushed in. A wall of water slammed her backward. She hit the floor hard, breath knocked out of her, and the current dragged her through the living room into the kitchen, slamming her against the table, the counter, the cabinets. She clawed at anything she could grip, but everything was slick and smooth and soaked. Then sudden stillness. The water froze. She floated. And that's when she saw them. People. All around her, floating upright, eyes closed, mouths open. Men, women, children, some old, some in nightgowns, some with seaweed twisted around their wrists like bracelets. Their skin was pale, bloated, lips blue, faces slack. They circled her without moving, and then they opened their eyes, all at once. Black eyes, hollow eyes. No whites, no pupils, just blackness. They reached for her. Fingers touched her arms, her face, her throat. One pressed a hand to her chest and pushed Miranda. Woke up on the floor, gasping, soaked, alone. The house was bone dry. The windows were cracked with heat. Dust floated in the golden morning light. Her clothes were dry. Her skin felt tight with salt. Her ears rang like she'd been underwater for hours. She stumbled outside. The street was dry. The beach was in the distance, 2 blocks away. No storm, no flood, nothing. But when she looked back at the house, really looked, she saw the seaweed clinging to the porch rails, salt crusted on the doorknob, and something else. The siding, once the color of coral, had turned darker, bloated, wet. She left that morning, didn't pack, didn't clean, left the key in the rusted tin box and drove until the humidity broke and her skin stopped smelling like fish. A week later, she searched for the listing online. It was gone. She called the realtor's office. Number disconnected. The house still stands. Locals walk wide around it. They say the tide never reaches that far in. They say it hasn't for decades. But sometimes on humid nights, you can smell the salt 2 blocks in, and sometimes people don't check out. The land out near Pecos always felt older than it had any right to. Wide and flat, the kind of land that didn't seem to end, where the wind carried dust and heat and whispers that didn't belong to anyone living. The ranch sat 20 miles out of town, right off farm to Market Road 1218, past the dry creek bed and the rusted windmill that hadn't turned in decades. Folks didn't talk about the place much, but everyone knew it. The Barrow Ranch, 160 acres of parched soil, brittle mesquite, and one long-dead cattle barn that sagged like something had pulled it down from the inside, they said. The place hadn't been lived in since '82, when the last Barrow boy disappeared. Before that, the old man, Ed Barrow, had been found shot through the neck with his boots off and his mouth full of red sand. The local sheriff called it suicide, but no one really bought that. What man shoots himself in the neck, then takes off his boots and lies down like he's getting ready for sleep? I hadn't been out that way in years. Not since my cousin Kyle dared me to cross the cattle gate one night when we were 12. We saw it glow then. Just as the sun hit the horizon, the ranch lit up red. Not like sunset, more like fire under the dirt. Like something buried there was breathing heat into the soil. We ran before it got dark. We heard the whispering too. Faint, dry, like a voice made of sand and breath. Kyle swore it said, "You're next," but I told him he was hearing things. Hell, maybe we both were. But that whisper stayed in my head for 20 years. It was a call I got from my uncle back in April that dragged me back. He said Kyle'd been found in a motel off I-10, holed up alone, shaking like a leaf. Wouldn't talk, wouldn't eat. Just muttered nonsense about a red glow, something waking up, and how he should have shut the gate. A week later, he slit his wrists in the bathtub with a motel keycard. He left no note, just a map, one of those cheap gas station kinds, folded into a perfect square with a red marker circle around one spot. The Barrow Ranch. I didn't want to go. I had a good life in Dallas. Wife, kid, a job I didn't hate. But Kyle and I had been close brothers, really. And something about the way that map was folded, like he'd folded it slow, precise, with shaking hands, stuck with me. Like it was a warning. Or a breadcrumb trail he wanted me to follow. So I went. Left on a Friday after work, told my wife. It was for closure, for peace. She didn't argue. She'd seen the look in my eyes since the call. The kind of look that says, "This won't go away until I see it for myself." The road out to Pecos hadn't changed much. Still long and straight and lonely. Tumbleweeds still blew like ghosts across the asphalt, and the gas station still smelled like burnt coffee and wet gravel. By the time I hit FM 1218, the sun was already slipping. That thick orange haze hung over the land like heat stroke. I passed the windmill, slowed at the old gate. The metal bars were rusted through, the padlock long gone. A dry rattling sound, like bones in a can, came from somewhere deep on the property. Parked the car and stepped out. Silence. Not the peaceful kind. The dead kind. No insects, no birds. Just wind pressing against my ears like a held breath. The air smelled scorched, like metal left too long in the sun. Then I saw it. The glow. It wasn't the sky, and it wasn't the sun. It came from the ground. From beneath the ranch. Red, like the embers of a dying fire, but it pulsed. Faintly at first, then with more urgency, like a heartbeat. It bled through the cracks in the dirt, through the slats of the barn, through the broken windows of the ranch house. Like the land itself was lit from underneath by something that wanted out. I should have turned back. Every part of me screamed. But I walked forward, The barn groaned as I passed it. Not from wind, it was more like it recognized me. The board strained inward, and a shadow moved just behind one of the gaping holes in the wall. A shape, human-sized but wrong in. The way it bent. I stared, unblinking, until it vanished. I walked toward the ranch house. The steps were still intact, somehow, but soft. They sagged under my weight like the wood didn't remember how to hold anything up anymore. The front door was wide open. Inside, the walls were scorched black. No fire damage, no soot. Just scorched, like they'd been touched by something. Too hot to exist. Then the whisper came, closer now. Right beside my ear, "You're next." I froze. It was the same voice from 20 years ago. Same dry rasp. Same finality. A hallway stretched ahead. At the end, a door stood slightly ajar, red light spilling through the crack like a thin, bloody smile. I stepped closer. The floor groaned under me, not in protest, in hunger. I could feel it, like the house was waiting. Inside that room, I found the chair. A plain wooden chair, empty, facing the wall. A dark stain beneath it, circular and dried, but somehow still wet to the touch when I knelt, and next to it, another map, folded the same way as Kyle's, same red circle. But this time, it wasn't the ranch. It was my house, in Dallas. Marked. Clean. Behind me. Something whispered again, not from the house this time, but from the dirt. The glow outside grew brighter, pressing in against the walls like it wanted in, or wanted me out. The ground trembled underfoot, and I felt the chair scrape slightly against the floor as if nudged by an invisible hand. I ran, didn't look back. The barn screamed behind me as I passed, a human sound, one long, hollow wail of pain and rage, and grief all tangled together. The whispering didn't stop when I reached the car. It just grew quieter, like it knew where I was going, like it had timed that I drove fast. Didn't stop until I hit Odessa. Slept in the backseat with the engine running and the doors locked. I should have burned the map. I should have told no one. But when I got home, my wife was waiting with the folded paper in her hands. Same one, same red circle. Our street. She didn't say anything, just handed it to me and pointed out the window, and there it was, just past. The backyard. In the dirt near the tool shed, a red glow pulsing softly, whispering, "You're next." It started the day Nora signed the lease. She hadn't even planned on moving to Plano. But after her second miscarriage and the quiet collapse of her marriage, the idea of staying in Austin made her stomach knot. She needed somewhere far enough that it didn't carry echoes of the life she couldn't return to, but close enough that she didn't feel completely severed from her world. Plano was a placeholder, a resting stop, a suburb with enough quiet to forget things. That was all she wanted. The apartment itself was cheap. That was the first red flag. In that part of town, where newlyweds and young professionals populated the sterile, pretty apartment blocks, Nora found a listing that was oddly out of place. A mid-century two-bedroom walk-up with no pictures of the interior, just one blurry shot of the red door and the small wooden patio. Unit B, 2251 Spring Hollow Lane. She asked the property manager if she could see it before signing. He chuckled over the phone. "Sure you want to? It's a little stuck in time. Most folks prefer the newer units, but she did see it. And it was stuck in time. The carpet was shag, a shade of greenish gold that hadn't been manufactured since the Carter administration. The wallpaper curled at the seams like paper left too long in the sun. The kitchen had a plastic rotary phone mounted on the wall, and in the living room, above the fireplace mantel, hung a clock. It was the only object in the apartment that looked new. Not modern, just untouched by the passage of time. Oval-shaped, dark wood, Roman numerals painted in blood red. The second, hand ticked with an audible click-click-click that seemed to echo slightly, as if the room itself wanted it to be heard. Nora found herself staring at it longer than she should have. "You can take it down if it bugs you," the manager said. When he noticed, previous tenant didn't want to. Said it belonged to the unit. She moved in 2 days later. The silence of the apartment felt like peace. At first, the dreams began the first night. She dreamt of rooms. Endless rooms, stacked atop one another like nesting dolls. In each, a version of herself lived, young, old, angry, crying, bleeding. And each of them looked up at the same clock, the same exact one from her living room. When the hands reached 3:07, the room shook. The walls began to breathe. A low humming sound, like insects inside a throat, would build and build until Nora woke up screaming, throat raw, soaked in sweat. She told herself it was stress, grief manifesting. The therapist she used to see warned her this might happen. After the second loss, bodies remember things. So do minds, except the clock wasn't just haunting her dreams. On the third night, at 3:07 a.m., the second hand stopped. She was awake, sitting on the couch with a mug of tea, trying to avoid the pull of nightmares. The silence was absolute. No wind, no hum of the fridge, nothing. Just the click-click-click. And then it stopped. She looked at the clock. 3:07, and then she noticed the walls. They weren't just moving. They were throbbing. She got up slowly. The living room wall, the one behind the couch, pulsed inward and out like it had veins buried deep inside, as if the drywall was only a thin film stretched over something massive and alive. She backed away, heart stammering, hand shaking so hard she nearly dropped the tea. Her skin crawled with the sensation of being watched from inside the walls. From behind them, the clock ticked again. Just once. Then the walls stopped. The next morning, she checked the wall. Nothing. No movement. No trace. But her teacup, which she had dropped and smashed in the panic, was still in pieces on the floor. She left a voicemail for the property manager. No answer. No return call. That day she explored the building. 3 units. Hers was the only one. That seemed occupied. Unit A had its windows covered in newspaper. Unit C had a chain and padlock on the outside, as if someone wanted to keep something in, not out. She knocked on both. No response. She went to the library and asked for any old records of the address. There weren't any. The librarian checked 3 databases and frowned. "This building doesn't show up in the city's occupancy records. Are you sure the address is right?" She was. That night, she unplugged the clock. She took it off the wall and set it face down on the floor. It still ticked at 3:07 a.m. She watched, not the clock, but the walls. And once again, they pulsed. This time, slower, with intent. And then she heard it. A voice. It didn't come from outside the apartment. It came from inside the wall, low, raspy, as if the drywall were. "Lips and lungs and teeth. You're home now." She stumbled back, reaching for her phone. But her hand wouldn't move. She looked down and realized her fingers were trembling uncontrollably, as if something had reached inside her nerves and started playing with the wires. Her legs buckled. She hit the floor. The walls kept pulsing. The clock ticked once more, then it started again. 3:07 a.m. It never moved forward. Never changed. The time reset. The next day, she drove to the police station. She tried explaining. Not the pulsing or the voices, just that something was wrong with the unit. That she didn't feel safe. That maybe someone had died there. The officer was polite, listened, then searched the address. "Ma'am," he said, frowning, Are you sure that's where you live? Yes. He turned the monitor toward her. The property at 2251 Spring. Hollow Lane, Unit B, had burned down in 1978. Electrical fire. No survivors. An elderly couple. A toddler. Someone rebuilt it, she whispered. Not according to the city. The lot's empty. She went back, drove straight to the unit. It was still there. Her car parked out front. Her mail in the box. The red door. The porch. She opened the door and stepped into a room that wasn't hers. It looked the same, but it smelled different. Mold, blood, damp rot, and copper. The walls had no paint now. They were slick and red, as if skinned. The carpet squelched beneath her feet. She backed out and turned around to run, but the neighborhood was gone. There was only fog. Thick, dense, swallowing the porch, the sidewalk, everything. She slammed the door, and the clock started ticking again. That was a week ago. Now, she wakes at 3:07 every night. She doesn't remember going to sleep. Sometimes she's on the couch, sometimes on the floor. Once, she woke up in the closet, door locked from the outside. Every night, the clock stops. Every night, the walls pulse. And sometimes, a hand presses through the wall just beneath the paint. Fingers too long, too thin. They slide along the surface like they're trying to remember what skin feels like. She stopped trying to call for help. The phone doesn't work. Her cell just shows static. No service. And the building, it doesn't let her leave anymore. She tried. She got in her car, drove 3 blocks, then the same red door appeared in front of her again. Now, she's writing everything down. Not because she thinks someone will read it, but because the clock wants her to forget. She's already forgetting names. Her mother's voice. Her own birthday. But she remembers the fire. Somehow, bits and pieces. A child crying. A man screaming. And in the flames, the clock. Always the clock. Tonight, at 3:07 a.m., the voice said something new. You're ready. Wall near the fireplace peeled open like wet paper. Something stepped through. And now the clock has stopped ticking. Completely. But the walls are still pulsing. And this time, they're not going to stop. The mansion stood just past the tree line off County Road 279, the last structure before pinewood and moss swallowed the world whole. Locals in Tyler had stopped speaking of it after the 70s, back when the county record showed it was sold. To a woman with a long hyphenated last name and a fondness for velvet gloves. Some claimed she was part of a European family once noble, now fallen. Others said she had no family at all, that she'd simply arrived one night in a black car with fogged windows, and the mansion welcomed her like it had been waiting for her, waiting for them. It had been called the Graveridge Estate once. The brick was the kind that looked burned even when it was new, and the windows were tall enough to step through. A wide wraparound porch sagged with age but never quite collapsed. Ivy didn't just climb it. It strangled the outer walls, as if trying to pull it back underground. The invitation started again in late spring. Real paper, one's cream cardstock with thick looping calligraphy. Sent through the post. Addressed by name. Wade Carrington got his first. He found it wedged between an overdue electric bill and a realtor's flyer for lakefront property in Quitman. No return address, but it was wax-sealed with an emblem he didn't recognize. A crooked eye inside a set of jaws. The inside simply read, "You are cordially invited to dine at Graveridge Estate. An evening of food, laughter, and remembrance. Saturday, 8 p.m. Dress formally. Do not bring phones. We will provide everything you need." There was no RSVP. Wade didn't think much of it. His wife, Anna, joked that it had to be one of those immersive theater experiences like in Austin. Maybe it's a local thing like dinner and a mystery show, she'd said while adjusting the hem of her black dress in the mirror. We could use a night out, right? The first thing Wade noticed as they pulled up was the cold. It was East Texas in May. It should have been muggy, full of gnats and slow sunsets. But near the mansion, the air changed. Their headlights cut through fog that hadn't been there a second ago. The trees leaned too far inward. The gravel drive crunched like bone. There were already other cars lined up in a neat row, as if placed by hand. Mostly black sedans, a few old-fashioned ones with chrome grills. Wade thought it was part of the show. Inside, the house was warm. Candles flickered from chandeliers that looked like they hadn't been dusted in decades. The air smelled of lavender and iron. A woman in a silver dress greeted them without blinking. She didn't give her name, just smiled and held out a tray with 2 glasses of something red. Anna hesitated. Wade drank first. More guests arrived, maybe 20 in all. Some local, some from out of town. All invited by name. No one seemed to know who had sent the invitations or why. But the food was good. Unreasonably good. Thick slabs of beef that melted on the tongue, wines that burned just right, bread still steaming inside. Dishes Wade couldn't name but somehow craved. The kind of food that made you forget everything outside your body. The kind that filled you to the soul and left you smiling with your hands shaking. They never saw a kitchen. Plates just arrived, course after course. There was music too. A record player hummed out something that sounded like a waltz dragged through tar. Off rhythm, warped but haunting. It was after the dessert, a creamy, white pudding with flecks of something dark that Anna leaned close and whispered, "Doesn't it feel like we've been here too long?" Wade checked his watch. It was dead. Every clock in the house read 9:17. One of the guests, a man named Burke Burley, red-faced and chatty, stood up with a laugh. "Well, I'm going to be the first to say it. Damn fine meal. Now how do we pay?" "The bill?" His voice echoed a little too much in the dining hall. The silver-dressed woman returned, her smile wider than before. "You've already paid," she said. That's when the lights dimmed. Just lightly. Like the house inhaled. Burke tried the front door. It didn't open. Not locked, just wouldn't move. Like the wood had fused to the frame. He banged, cursed, threw his shoulder into it. Nothing. Anna was holding Wade's arm too tight. Her breath came fast. Her heels clicked as she backed toward the hallway. Others tried the windows. Same story. Not glass, not anymore. Just something that looked like it. Sound didn't travel right when you screamed. Then came the whispering. Low at first, like it came from inside the walls. The kind of whisper you hear when a house settles at night. But it grew. Took shape. Grew words. Stay. Stay. The silver-dressed woman was gone. People panicked. Someone kicked over a chair. Another tried lighting the curtains on fire. The flames didn't catch. The fabric shimmered, then pulsed like muscle. Wade grabbed Anna's hand and ran for the stairs. He didn't know why. He just knew something was coming up from under the floorboards. It made the wood bulge. Breathe. Upstairs, doors lined both sides of the hall. All open. All dark inside. They chose the second from the left. It had no windows. Anna tried her phone. Still nothing. Wade pressed his ear to the door. He could hear something move outside. Not footsteps, wet dragging. Like something slick pulling itself down the hall. And then, silence. They stayed in that room for what felt like hours. Anna cried once. Wade held her. At one point, the door opened an inch. No footsteps, no handle turning. Just a slow, soundless open. The hallway was empty. The next morning, they woke up on the lawn, still in their formal clothes. No blood, no bruises. Just mud and dead leaves on their skin. The cars were gone. The mansion was gone, not burned. Not collapsed, gone, and open. Field sat where it had been. Not even a foundation remained. Wade never talked about it again. Not to his wife, not to anyone. He told himself it was a dream, a mass hallucination, something in the food. But every night since, at exactly 9:17 p.m., he smells lavender and Iron Dot and Anna. She hasn't spoken a word since. Doctors say there's nothing wrong with her. Physically, anyway. She just sits in the living room with the lights off, mouthing a word over and over. Wade never tells them what she's saying. But if you get close enough, you can read her lips. She's saying, chew. The sun was already half buried behind the hills when they pulled up to the bungalow in Del Rio, the heat still clinging to the dry air like a wet rag left on a stove. Sheriff Dale Conley cut the engine and sat a moment in silence, eyes scanning the weather-worn house at the edge of the pecan orchard. Nothing stirred, no cars in the gravel drive, no curtain shifts in the windows, not even the soft hum of an air conditioner that had any right to still be running in this heat. Just the old wood siding, faded green paint curling at the corners, and a porch light flickering faintly against the creeping dusk. The call had come in from a neighbor around 4. Said the renters hadn't been seen in days. Said there was a smell. Sheriff Conley had heard that before. Usually it meant a busted septic line or a dead raccoon under the porch. Sometimes it meant something worse. Deputy Marta Boone joined him, hand already on the latch of the cruiser. You smell it? She asked. He didn't answer, but he caught the same thick coppery tang when the breeze shifted. Not rot, not entirely. Something sweeter, like iron and damp cloth. They crossed the yard, boots crunching over sun-bleached grass and brittle mesquite pods. The porch groaned under their weight. A mailbox swung open and shut with the breeze. Dale knocked once sharp, and loud. Nothing. Again. Still nothing. Del Rio PD, he said loudly. Anyone home? Boone tried the doorknob. It turned. They stepped into stillness. The air inside was colder than expected. Not cool cold. A damp chill that didn't belong in Texas in June. The curtains were drawn, but what little light leaked in through the cracks shimmered strangely against the hallway floorboards. Dale's hand went instinctively to the gun on his hip. They moved, from room to room, clearing them slowly. Living room empty, save for an overturned coffee mug and a TV frozen on static. 2 bedrooms, both with the bedding undisturbed, drawers open like someone had been packing in a hurry. Or rummaging. It was the bathroom at the end of the hallway that made them stop. Boone went in first. He heard her breath catch. Jesus. He stepped in behind her. The sink was filled with teeth. Dozens of them. Small, white, wet. Some still had blood on them. Fresh. Not dried. And the toothbrushes, 3 of them still in the cup by the mirror. Untouched. That part chilled him more than the teeth. Call for backup, he said quietly. Get forensics out here. Boone stepped back into the hallway and keyed her radio. Dale stayed where he was, staring at the teeth. Human, definitely. But they were small, child-sized. Yet the house was rented to a couple in their 40s. Number. Kids. He leaned closer to the sink, careful not to touch anything. The blood wasn't smeared, it was pooled. Like the teeth had been yanked and dropped all at once. But there were too many. More than one mouth's worth. Something glinted beneath. The drain grate. He squinted. It was a gold molar. Adult dash-sized. Boone came back pale. Units on the way. ETA 10. He nodded. We clear the garage? No. They moved together, flashlights out even though there was still some daylight slipping through the clouds outside. The door to the garage was unlatched. Inside, it was pitch black. The moment they stepped through, the cold intensified. Like stepping into a cellar that had never known sunlight, they scanned the space. Stacks of moving boxes, a dusty mattress against the far wall, paint cans, a rusted bicycle, and a metal chair in the center, bolted to the concrete. A strap hung from each leg. The seat was stained dark. Above it, a bare light bulb dangled, but wouldn't switch on, and on the wall behind the chair, someone had scratched words into the sheetrock, over and over. Open wide, open wide. It was written at least 50 times, in what looked like fingernail gouges. Some of them had dried blood caked in the grooves. Neither of them spoke. Dale finally said, "This is bad." Boone said nothing. They left the garage and waited in silence for the backup to arrive. The investigation unearthed very little. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints except those of the two runners, Kevin and Lorraine Spinks. Married 6 years. Teachers, quiet, no priors. Except they never came back. Their car was found abandoned 5 miles out near the Rio Grande. No blood, no sign of struggle. Just their wedding rings on the dash. The dental analysis revealed the teeth belonged to at least 5 different individuals, 2 adults, 3 children. None of them matched any known missing persons, and more disturbingly, some of the teeth weren't human. They resembled human teeth, but the roots were wrong, like they had grown too deep, too far, twisted, as if they had been pulled from something that wasn't supposed to have them. The house was sealed. Crime scene tape, biohazard tags. Still, the reports didn't stop. 2 weeks later, a cleaning crew was sent in. They didn't make it past the porch. Said they heard someone whispering inside. Something low. Wet. Said they found a single tooth on the doormat, still warm. The bungalow stayed empty after that. Realtors refused to show it. People who drove past said the bathroom light was always on, even when the power had been cut, and just once, someone caught a glimpse in the mirror, not their own. Reflection. But a mouth, grinning, wide, full of tiny, perfect teeth, and still chewing. The one-story brick home sat quiet on a cul-de-sac in North Denton. Red clay bricks faded under the weight of time and sun, the windows dusty, the grass overgrown and sickly. Most houses in the neighborhood had kids' bikes leaning on porches, or plastic flamingos in flower beds, but not this one. The brick home was always still like something dead and waiting to rot. They said the Parrish family lived there once. Mark, Elaine, and their 2 kids, Ryan and little Emma. They moved in late August, just before the school year started. No grand welcome. Just a U-Haul that rolled up at dusk and sat parked in the driveway for 3 days straight, half unloaded, like even the movers had grown uneasy about stepping inside. Neighbors watched from behind blinds, as you do in small Texas towns. You keep to your own, but you notice. Mark seemed decent, tall and broad-shouldered, with sunburned arms and a stiff walk like a man used to hard labor. Elaine waved once from across the street, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. She had those deep purple rings under her lashes like she hadn't slept right in weeks. The kids didn't come out much, but one time someone saw Ryan riding a scooter. He stopped short at the edge of their drive, turned around like he hit an invisible wall, then scooted back without saying a word. Then came the night of October 3 RD. No one heard screams. No lights flickered. No sirens showed up. The home just sealed itself. At 6:12 p.m., neighbor Marla Griggs was walking her dachshund past the house. She saw the front door, which had been cracked open just moments before, slam shut without wind, without hands. She said she heard all 3 locks click into place, one by one. The handle, the deadbolt, and the chain inside. The sound carried, sharp in the autumn dusk. The little dog growled, pulled back on the leash. Marla thought it was strange, but stranger things happened in Denton. She told herself someone must have shut the door from inside, but no one came out after that. Not? The next day, or the one after, mail piled up in the box. Newspapers yellowed on the porch. No one saw the kids leave for school. No car moved from the drive, and then the lights came on. Every evening. Around 7:04 p.m., like clockwork, the lights in the living room flared on. Curtains drawn, but shadows moved behind them. Tall ones, short ones, one that limped. Sometimes, people swore they heard a child's laughter echo faintly through the lawn like it was caught in the breeze. But only when you stood real still and didn't blink. Police were called. They tried to force entry. Tried every key they had on the city ring. Nothing worked. The front door wouldn't budge. Neither would the windows. Like the house had grown muscles behind the frame, they brought out a battering ram once. The officer, who tried it, dislocated his shoulder on the first swing. Said it felt like the house hit back. Eventually, they wrote it off. Said the family must have skipped town. But their car was still in the driveway. Their phone still pinged inside. And when they got a drone up to peek through the skylight, it captured something unnatural. The footage, most of it was corrupted, just static and glitch. But one frame got saved. It showed the family in the living room, all four of them, standing shoulder to shoulder, facing the wall, not moving, eyes open, wide, empty, like they were frozen mid-scream, their mouths stretching longer than any human mouth should. Emma's arms were too long. Ryan's neck bent the wrong way. Mark's head was tilted back so far you could see his spine, under the skin. But the worst part was the figure standing just behind them. It was all shadow. No face, just two gleaming points like coals for eyes. Its hands hovered inches from Elaine's shoulders, claws curved but not touching, like it was waiting for something. Or feeding. After that, they grounded the drone. Cops stopped going near the place. Real estate signs went up, then taken down. Eventually, the city said the house was condemned. They put a nitrogen monoxide trespassing sign on the mailbox in 2019, but that didn't stop the kids from daring each other. In 2021, 3 teenagers broke in through the back fence. They found the back door sealed, just like the front, but one of them had bolt cutters. They cut through a garage window, climbed inside. Only one came back. His name was Caleb. He's in a psych ward in Dallas now. He won't speak. Won't eat unless someone feeds him. They say he draws the same thing over and over in crayon. 4 stick figures standing in a row, and the 5th one behind them, made of scribbles, red circles for eyes. Every picture has the same note written at the bottom in jagged handwriting. That doesn't match his own. IT. Let me out. It doesn't let them out. People sometimes still drive past the house at night. Most don't stop, but the ones who do say the curtains twitch. That if you look long enough, you'll see shadow shift behind them, jerky, unnatural, like puppets on broken strings. And if you knock, God forbid you knock, you might hear. Second knock back. A slower one, louder, like it's coming from deep under the floorboards. They say the house doesn't want new owners. It doesn't care about squatters or thieves. It wants witnesses. It wants you to see what it's done. And if you linger long enough on that front step, you might hear the locks clicking again from the outside.